good notes for to keep track of what we all said and in case of references following up. I see we've passed the 300 mark in participants, so I'm going to give us maybe 30 more seconds and then we'll start up. So welcome to those who have just joined. Well, I think the number that we've just reached of 351, well, participants is a good moment for us to open the sessions. Let me just say a big welcome to all of the participants. Thank you very much for joining. It's wonderful really to have everybody across all the time zones from the very early to the very late, and a special thanks to all of those who are waking up early and also joining us late. Let me begin by recognizing some of our distinguished participants. We have many across all the time zones and countries, but I want to mention we have with us honorable, well, I hope that you have joined, sirs. I know it's quite early. We have Honorable Minister for Nigeria, His Excellency for Chad, and the Honorable State Minister for the Maldives. Let me say we're very honored to have you join us. And to all of you, all distinguished guest participants, guests and friends, thank you for being part of these proceedings. My name is Peter Lawless. I'm here in the GEF Secretariat, and we're convening and hosting this session to bring us all together. I'll be moderating the discussions to help us go through and keep going through this very rich agenda for the next 4 days. I brought my hand watch, wristwatch with me, so I'll also be helping us to keep the time because we have a lot to discuss. So let me just say a couple of things to get us started as we join. I see we have now 381, 82, 83 participants. First, let me just say a couple of words about the purposes and the goals of these meetings. The first objective, this is a GEF introduction seminar, is to help introduce all of you to the GEF. So in these next actually 4 half days, compressed into the 4 hours in the virtual setting, what we would like to do is take a walk together through the work of the partnership. So what you'll see, as you'll see in the agenda, which Christina, I hope everyone got it. She circulated it in an update, I think just recently. We will be taking a close look at what we do, how we do it, and also who we are. And also, it's very important, I'd like us to look as we go through at the why of each part of the picture that we're going to be describing, each part of the GEF partnership, and to understand why we're doing that, both individually and collectively for the whole sessions, to see as part of getting to the mission, the overall mission of results and benefits for the global environment across our countries and across the partnership. And this year, especially when we talk about, introduce ourselves to the GEF and what we are doing, we'll have a chance to have an early glimpse of the just started up GEF 8 replenishment discussion. So it's also a very important moment in that sense. The second objective, and this will be the only 2 objectives that I want to highlight, is to introduce ourselves to each other. The partnership is strongest when we know each other. We understand what we do, and we build the capacity and the relationships to work together. This is about the GEF partnership. Now, getting to know each other is challenging in this virtual format because normally what we do is we have a session here in Washington, D.C. in January and February under the snow, and that's a very good format for getting to know each other because we're all bunkered down or hunkered down in that setting. But we'll try this, and we have a couple of ideas to have us see each other as we go through the session. Very importantly, as part of getting to know each other, I will in a short while be introducing our new CEO, who you can see on the screen already, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, who's joining us from a very early hour in Costa Rica. So thank you very much, Carlos Manuel. We're very excited about this part of the session, and we'll get to it. It's coming up later on in the morning. Let me also mention you will be meeting different folks from the GEF Secretariat, where I work. You'll be, and these will be the folks who will be running through each part of the agenda for us. So there will be people from the programming office, which is headed by a director, Gustavo Fonseca, and Claude Gascon. There will be folks from our policy, strategy and operations office. This is headed by our director, Françoise Clot, who I see on the screen there already, at least on the first batch of photos. We also have our communications office and our front office. So you'll learn a little bit about how the GEF is organized, the GEF Secretariat is organized, which maps to the work of the partnership. So let me just lastly highlight a couple of simple mechanics and ground rules for the functioning of this system, these sessions. And thanks for saying hello on the chat, everybody. It's great to hear you on the chat. All of us can, and it's great to see where you're from too. And for those who have turned on your video cameras, we will have a session actually eventually. This is part of the mechanics. We'll have a virtual coffee soon, and then I'm going to ask everyone to turn on the cameras. It's great if you turn them on now to say hello. We will be testing our bandwidth when we have the virtual coffee to see if we can handle 444 participants with videos on, but we're definitely going to do it. And then we'll take some time out to try and see each other and scroll across all the video screens. So as we get to the sessions, we will save time for discussion, questions and answers. That will also be a moment to say hello and greetings to Addis Ababa and all the others. And as you probably saw the guidelines for these sessions, I hope you did. Christina sent them around, I think, again over the weekend. And they have indicated that in order to ask questions, because we have so many participants, we have an email, which is to William Ellers, who is, I'll be introducing in a moment, actually. And so once we get to that moment of questions and answers, I'll let you know. And we would like to try and guide questions to there and use the chat line to say hello and to let us know where everyone is. That's really greatly appreciated. Hi, everybody. Côte d'Ivoire, hello, good morning. So we do have interpretation. I hope I'm not speaking too quickly for the interpretation now. It's simultaneous in these plenary sessions. It's simultaneous.
15 minutes now, it's okay, sir. Call just for the
simultaneous interpretation among English, French, and Spanish. And so thank you very much, interpreters, wherever you are, for waking up or for staying up for us to help us through the sessions. As I mentioned, we'll have virtual coffees each day. And eventually you'll see on day 3, I think it is, we'll have the chance to go into breakout groups so we can have even more time for questions, answers, and discussions on the many topics that you'll be hearing. Let me just also say, please remember that there were in advance readings and courses about the GEF and the partnership. We hope very much they've been helpful because we wanted to put those together for you to provide a bit of a foundation and background for the dive in and the walkthrough that we're going to be going through as we get going today. So without further ado, and I've done this in a way so I've given us a few extra minutes. I think I'm slotted until 7:20, but let us start now so we can have even a little bit of extra time for the coming sessions. I think our first session, William, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everybody. Good evening.
Good. All right. Well, so if that's all right, I would suggest, and hello, thanks for everybody to say hello on the chat box, and please continue to do so. I will, with much pleasure, turn over the microphone to my colleague here in the GEF Secretariat, William Ellers. Many of you may already know him. William is the secretary to the GEF Council, which is a very important function. You know, our council meets twice a year. They're our governing body. William is also the head of the GEF Country Support Program and the partnership work of the GEF from the GEF Secretariat. And you might or might know he's also a founder. William was around at the very beginning of the formation of the GEF in a different capacity for his country of Uruguay, and helping to put together well, I won't tell you the time when that happened because it might be a question on his quiz, put together this architecture and this framework that has evolved into almost 30, well, I won't tell you how many years later either, this wonderful GEF partnership, which we're all together with. William, this is the topic you'll see on the agenda. What is GEF? Overview and quiz. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and hello, everybody, wherever you happen to be. It's a pleasure to join you once again in one of these seminars in this new format. It's the first time we're doing one of our introduction seminars with so many people in a virtual format. So we want to make it as fun as we can. And so we're going to kick off with a quiz. Hopefully you were able to do the e-course. It gives you all the basics about the GEF, because that will make this more fulfilling, more interesting. And if you did, these questions will be quite easy. But in any case, for everybody, it's just a reminder of the absolute basics of the origins of the GEF and how it is configured. So the mechanics will be like this. In a moment, I will ask Ted to put the quiz up. Then I will read, these are 10 questions. So I will read the questions one by one with their multiple choice answers. As we go along, you can click on the button that you think is the correct answer, or more than one button if you think more than one is correct. And then we will see the results and we will go through each one of the questions in greater detail. I'm going to read them out because that will allow then the interpreters to interpret those questions and their multiple choice answers for everybody to understand fully. So hopefully that was clear, and therefore I will ask Ted to put up the quiz. Thank you very much. So here is the quiz, and this screen, Ted, seems to show the results rather than the questions and the buttons to press.
This should be just the questions here.
Well, the one I can see.
Oh, I think because you're a co-host. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we're seeing just the questions, William.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Good. Got it.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. So, first question: when was the GEF created? Options: 1990, 1991, 1993, or 1994. Question 2: the GEF is governed by which document? The GEF goal and mission, the GEF instrument, the GEF agreement, or the GEF treaty? The main purpose of the GEF is to finance the incremental costs of projects, finance the main environmental conventions, finance the environmental projects of the agencies, or B and C. Question
Does everyone
4.
have, William, are you on question 3? I have question 1 and 2 still.
I'm moving my own up. I think each one has to move their own up and down the screen. So we've done question 3. Let me go to question 4. How many countries are members of the GEF? So the options are 180, 183, 184, or 185. Question 5, how many constituencies make up the GEF Council? 30, 32, 33, or 35. Question 6, the Council is advised by which body or bodies? STAP, the options are STAP, IEO, Trustee, and Secretariat. Question 7, how many agencies are there currently? 3, 10, 15, or 18? Question 8. Question 8. How is
You might have gone on mute, William. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Christina had to mute everybody, so now we're back online.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so 8. How is GEF funded? By developed country contributions, by developing country contributions, by recipient and donor contributions, or by implementing agency contributions. Question 9. Who decides how the GEF funds will be allocated? And finally, question 10. The GEF funds projects in which of the following areas? And the options are biodiversity, climate change and land degradation, chemicals and waste in international waters, sustainable forest management, cross-cutting capacity development, or A and B. So we'll just give you a couple of seconds more to answer the questions, and Ted will then close it so everybody can see the results, and we will go through the questions one by one. It's funny, I see numbers fluctuating. On each table. Well, when my clock marks 7:19, we will close the poll. Just if you're not sure, don't worry. Just go ahead. This is a game, right? It's meant to be part of the opening icebreaker and entertainment, and at the same time to refresh your memory on some of these very basic aspects of the GEF. All right, Ted, you can lock the poll. Okay, I hope everybody can now see the results.
Okay, I'm just sharing the results here.
Okay.
Can we see them?
Not yet, not yet.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can
Okay,
see.
sometimes there's a bit of a lag.
All right, excellent. And thank you very much, Ted, for your help. So, first question. Yes, indeed, the majority got it right. 1991, the GEF was created. It was created at the time of the first Rio Convention. At the time, the basic idea was a trade-off between the developed countries who had developed in an unsustainable manner. Well, that we didn't know about the sustainability issue at the time, but that was the fact of life. And the developing countries were being asked to give a qualitative jump in their process of development from following the well-known path to one that was sustainable. To be able to do it, they needed the technology and the money, which was mostly in the hands of the developed countries. And therefore, this was the trade-off. The developing countries would do their part by becoming sustainable, and the developed countries would give them a hand to do so. And the GEF was the money part. It was the money part at the time. Maurice Strong was the chair of that world conference that was held in Rio. And the calculations at the time were already in the billions of dollars of 1990, which are probably closer to the trillions now. And the donors had to find a way to actually come up with it. So France got together with Germany, and at the World Bank, they decided they were going to start a pilot called the Global Environment Facility for the purpose of doing this, the funding of these projects that would also be tied to the first two main environmental conventions, climate change and biodiversity, which were also coming up at that time. So this pilot phase was begun in 1991, and therefore that is considered the beginning of the GEF. Then we move on to the second question, which refers to the document that governs the GEF. And again, the majority got it right. It's the GEF instrument. It's called the GEF instrument for the restructured global environment facility. Why is it called restructured? Because in the pilot phase, only donors participated in the governing body of the GEF. Since the GEF was going to be the financial mechanism of the conventions, those of us who were negotiating for our countries at the time, and that's why Peter said I was there, we said, okay, if it's going to be for us, then we have to also participate in the management of this fund. So we began a 2-year negotiation that ended in 1994 in Geneva with the adoption of this GEF instrument. And if you go to the GEF website and in the search bar, you put the word instrument, you will see that the second option is this GEF instrument. It has evolved since the beginning. There have been a few changes to adapt it to changes that have taken part over time. The focal areas changed, details like that. An interesting fact about the GEF instrument is that even though it was adopted by about 70 countries at the time, it did not become an international treaty as we normally consider these agreements, like, for instance, the conventions for the environment. The drafters, the group that approved it, actually gave instructions to 3 institutions to create the GEF by adopting 3 coinciding decisions. Those were the World Bank, the main body for infrastructure, UNDP, the main body at the time for development, and UNEP, the main agency for environment. So you will see in the back of the instrument the decisions, the coinciding decisions of these 3 institutions. And every time there is an amendment to the instrument, the 3 have to adopt it. So all those are the documents you find in the back of the booklet. Only the first few pages are the instrument, which is relatively short. Okay, let's go into number 3. The main purpose of the GEF is, and here the majority did not get it right. In fact, it is A is the correct answer. Article 2 of the instrument says that the GEF is an instrument for international cooperation to finance to provide grants and non-grants to finance the incremental costs of the agreed global environmental benefits. So why was this worded like that? And it was worded specifically like this because the GEF was not supposed to become another overall development fund. It was supposed to add to the already existing development projects from whatever agency, the cost of making them sustainable. And that's what we call incremental cost, because we had to increment the impact to make it sustainable. And the key to that, what does incremental cost mean? What incremental costs mean is easy to see, for example, in the production of energy, where if you produce energy with coal, it's the cheapest way to produce it, but it's also the most polluting. So if you move to sustainable, say wind or solar, or even gas, way of producing energy, you have a higher cost. And the difference between the 2 costs of those is called incremental costs. So at the beginning of the GEF, we used to have to put in the projects a number. What is the incremental cost of this project? But over time, we realized that that was very difficult to do, particularly if you're doing a protected area or a project in international waters. How do you actually calculate the number of incremental cost? What is the cost? What is that number? So the GEF has evolved into having a qualitative description of what the incrementality of the projects are. So let's move on to how many countries make up the GEF Council, how many constituencies make up the GEF Council, and the answer is correct. There are 32. Of the 32, there are 14 for developed countries, 16 for developing countries, and 2 for the economies in transition. These constituencies can be single country or multi-country. A few of them are single country, particularly on the donor side, where the distribution of seats was done based on the contributions that they were going to make, which in turn were based on the IDA 10 contributions at the time. Those on the mostly recipient countries, the developing and the economies in transition, were distributed regionally. And that is why you have 4 in the Americas and Caribbean, and then you have 6 and 6 and 2. 6 in Africa, 6 in Asia, and 2 in the economies in transition, making a total of 18, if my math is correct. So that's how the council, how the constituencies were made up. As originally, as I said, there were only 70 countries. So the constituencies were relatively small. As new countries joined the GEF, they started joining the constituencies, mostly that were closest to their region. And that's why you will find them, the seats distributed that way. Now, the council is advised by which bodies? According to the instrument, there are 2 bodies that advise the council, and those are the STAP, which got the majority, very good, and the other one is the IEO. The STAP is a scientific and technical advisory panel. It is hosted by UNEP, made up of a team of scientists in the different areas who in turn are linked to international networks, and they review the projects to make sure that the science behind them is the most up-to-date, the most correct. The Independent Evaluation Office, as you will hear later on, well, you're also actually going to hear from STAP a greater explanation, so I'm not going to give you all the details, but the Independent Evaluation Office basically keeps us on track. And they look at portfolio analysis, they look at how the Secretariat is working, they do not do individual project evaluations. The trustee, of course, is part of the team. As the trustee holds the money in custody and distributes it according to the instructions of the council. And the Secretariat runs the day-to-day of the GEF and ensures that and reviews all the projects before they are submitted for consideration by the council. So next one is how many GEF agencies do we have? The majority got it right. It's 18. Originally, we had 3. Yes, as I said before, UNEP, World Bank, and UNDP. But then in GEF 4, there were a number of agencies that were working with countries preparing the projects, and they had to work through the 3 agencies. And the GEF Council found that that was impractical, and so the list was increased to 10 first. And then in GEF 5, we had a call for additional agencies, and that brought it to 18. So you have the original 3 plus other UN bodies like UNIDO and FAO, and then IFAD. Then we have the regional development banks, the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Development Bank. We've also added over time CAF, which is Latin American Development Bank, BOAD, the West African Development Bank. The South African Development Bank, even though that one was submitted as a national agency. And then we have some large international NGOs like CI, Conservation International, IUCN, and WWF US. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody, that should make 18. And sorry, I have missed 2. The 2 that are, shall we say, purely national, because the effort in GEF 5 was aimed at responding to the request of recipient countries to have national agencies. And during that process, we gave the GEF opened the door to a maximum of 10. We reached the number of 8. 5 of them were supposed to be national. In fact, 5 were regional, and 3 of them were actually national. So South African Development Bank, I already mentioned. They are obviously for South Africa. FECO is the institution for China, and FUNBIO for Brazil. And it's worthy to note that FUNBIO was in fact born out of a GEF project. So then we get to how is the GEF funded? And indeed, the majority got it right. Both developed and developing countries are contributors. So amongst the developed, of course, you've got the major international economies of the world in Europe, North America, Australasia, New Zealand, Japan. And the recipients, a number of them are also donors, like Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, India, China, Russia, and some of the others over time have been Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Argentina, and a few others have been donors at different times. So now here's a fun one. Who decides how the GEF funds will be allocated? Well, yes, here the majority did not get it correct. It is actually the replenishment that takes a decision. I've been told in the past that the replenishment is not an institution as such, but it is, however informal, it is the process whereby the tasks or the job that is going to be done by the GEF is decided, how much money is going to be contributed, and how much money goes to each activity. In fact, we're at the beginning of the replenishment process for GEF 8. So to describe it very briefly, we start off with a decision by the Council, which was taken last December, to actually launch the process. The process is led jointly by the trustee, who's responsible for the fundraising, together with the secretariat, who prepares the proposals. And so it is the trustee and the CEO who chair these meetings. First, there's an organizational note that is distributed, and that has already been done. It's been distributed to all the donors who participate and the observers. I'll get to that in a moment. And you can find it on the website. It's very simple. It actually gives a few of the basics, the meeting dates, that sort of a thing. Then the Secretariat prepares a first proposal that goes to the replenishment meeting, where it puts forward its ideas on, okay, what should we be doing? We've done so many activities over the years, almost 30 years now. What should we be? In fact, this 2021 is the 30th anniversary of the GEF. So what should we be doing to build on what has been done in the past? To do that, the Secretariat organized a series of technical advisory groups. So a lot of advice comes from different sectors, including scientists, agencies, countries, etc. And the Secretariat puts together a proposal. That goes to the first meeting, which in this case will take place in April. And the donors will have a discussion around this paper. They will make their comments. They will say things they like, things they don't like. And with those comments, we will get a second draft in September, together with a first idea of how much this could cost. Then we will go to January, where hopefully the paper is pretty much close to its final drafting. And a lot of the discussion goes on to, okay, how much money goes to each activity? And that's why I say the replenishment decides, because if you look at the replenishment document of the past of GEF 7, you will find in pages 160, 161, a table that says how much money goes per focal area, how much money goes for star locations where that is relevant, how much money, if it's chemicals, which doesn't have a star location, you'll see a subdivision between POPs in the Stockholm Convention, the mercury in the Minamata Convention, ozone depleting substances in the Montreal Protocol, and SICOM, the strategic initiative on chemicals management. And in international waters, of course, it's one envelope, shall we say, that is distributed for or destined for the large marine ecosystems, the surface waters like lakes and rivers, and then the underground waters like aquifers. And obviously, in international waters, all projects are regional because they have to be international, and therefore you have at least two partners. So this is the discussion that takes place in January. Apart from the focal areas and that have a star location, we have money dedicated to the enabling activities, which are the reports that countries have to submit to each of the conventions according to the appropriate timings determined by each convention. We also have corporate activities like the Small Grants Program and the Country Support Program. And we have the budget. The Secretariat has two functions, and the trustee and the staff and the Independent Evaluation Office. So when you put all those numbers together, you get the total of the replenishment level. And that's pretty strict. We can't deviate from what has been stated there. So I think hopefully that gave you an overview. And the participation, I mentioned the donors, 32, 33, depending on the period, are the donors. Then there's a number of observers that participate from the agencies, from the conventions, and very importantly, on this occasion, 5 observers from the recipient countries. So the voice of the recipient countries is also heard at the replenishment. There will be one for Latin America, one for Africa, one for Asia, one for Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and one for the SIDS. So those are the observers. And so now we get to the final question, which is what are the focal areas where the GEF has activity and finances projects? And of course, the correct answer is A and B: biodiversity, climate change, land degradation, chemicals and waste, and international waters. So that takes care of this introduction. I'm just checking my email. I see nobody has sent me any questions so far.
I do see William on the chat line. This is a special case because normally questions go to William, but since he's presenting, we have a couple from the chat line. One of them was if you could say a bit more about incrementality. And then the second question was if folks would like to have a copy of the questions and the answers too. I don't know if you give out the answers, if we'll have to change the questions the next time, but those are 2 questions I saw in the chat line.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think all the materials of this seminar will be on the appropriate page of the website. So everything will be there. If you do the e-course, a lot of these questions are in there. So you'll also get those answers, but we can put them all on the page on the website. The question of incrementality was because let's go to the period before 91 or before that, when we had, even starting in the 60s, the international cooperation for development, right? The United Nations had a system, which, as I mentioned, had as its main protagonist the UNDP, but even with the UNEP on environmental issues, which at that time, what shall we call them, secondary. Now they are part of the mainstream, fortunately, but they weren't at the beginning. The World Bank and other international cooperation banks and mechanisms were assisting countries to develop. So they had large infrastructure and social programs and so on. But they were following the model of the original, or what we knew at the time to be the best path towards development, which was what we called the developed countries had done. And when humanity realized that this wasn't working because the impact on development was very strong. We had to give this qualitative jump. We had to think in terms of sustainable development. So if you're talking about energy, you move away from the cheaper, more polluting, and you go to the renewable energies. If you're trying to save biodiversity, you started with protected areas where the human activity would be restricted so that you would allow nature to evolve. If you're talking about, we talk in general about land degradation, but the convention is to fight desertification, right? Particularly in Africa, but also in the rest of the world. So desertification was advancing because of the way we were doing agriculture and by the way we were destroying the forests. In the terms of chemicals, we were using chemicals that turned out to be very bad for the environment. And some of them were destroying the ozone layers, particularly if you were talking about air conditioning, that sort of thing. So if you had a project that was going to help you develop in the area, and I'll use the easiest example again of the production of energy, what was the difference in cost between making it cheap and making it sustainable? And that was the incremental cost. So, so that's, I hope that was explained that point. Do you see anything else, Peter?
No, I have not seen anything except on the chat box. Folks might have seen that Robert, that's Ted Schreiber, has circulated a link again to the training materials, the advanced reading materials that we have circulated. And I think there were a couple of questions about the red and blue on the screen, but then I think the ultimate answer was that what William said was the correct answer.
That was the idea anyway.
Yeah.
So, well, look, you have my email. You'll be sending me emails with your questions on sessions later on this day and in the coming days. So always feel free to contact me with any question you may have. And I'm happy to now hand back to Peter so we continue. Peter, you have the floor.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, William. Really appreciate it. This session, a quiz, sounds a little scary. We were all maybe students or taking quizzes at one point, but this is the way that we start our journey, give us an overview of what we are going to go through in the next few days. I always love to have the origin story, the creation story of the GEF, so we can have our historical background. And then the questions a little bit on understanding who we are, how many countries, the governing body, the partners, the agencies, the funding, and who decides. That was a tricky question. Thank you for mentioning at least that, William, because I'm not sure how many of us got it right, including here in the GEF Secretariat. And then William always puts in some rather difficult questions. And also a quick look as we begin at the core areas of our work, the project work and the conventions for which the GEF is a financial mechanism. So thanks very much, William. We're doing well on time. So what I would now like to do is actually move us to the next item on the agenda, which is, if I may say, an exciting headline event for this morning, which is a greeting from our CEO, Carlos Manuel. Many of you might know him already. Before, just let me say a couple of words, Carlos Manuel. Your biography, I think, is most well known, but before coming to the GEF, which was last September, he was Minister of Environment and Energy in Costa Rica. And as I think many of you may know, over many years, he has been a pioneer and part of the leadership internationally for environmental work and international cooperation for nature, people, and the planet. And also, of course, a very big part of the pioneering work that's been happening over these years in Costa Rica. We feel extremely lucky to have him in the GEF Secretariat, and I think for the GEF partnership as a whole. I'll turn it over to you, Carlos Manuel. Let me just say that the plan will be, you will make some remarks for us. We will have not questions and answers necessarily this morning, but we will have Carlos Manuel return on the final day of the session. And then we will have a dedicated time for, after we've gone through things, the chance for an open dialogue. We'll see if there's any time at all for a couple of questions this morning, but without anything more on the logistics, it is my great pleasure to introduce Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, our CEO. Are you there, Carlos Manuel? Do you hear me?
Yes, Peter, I hear you very well. And it's a great pleasure to be with all of you today. You know, beginning with the quiz, William, was a great idea because this is what I should have done as I entered at the GEF Secretariat last December, even though I've been close to the GEF for 30 years. I've been, Costa Rica's political focal point at the GEF. As I've been designing and participating in implementing GEF projects in Costa Rica, and as I prepare for this position of the GEF, you can understand that I went through every single document, all websites, and I thought I knew very well the GEF, 6 months ago, even 4 or 5 months ago, but it was not until I did the e-course that I really found out how much I knew from the GEF, and this e-course is spectacular, very good. So I tend to believe that we will have the same situation with most of the people who join us today, that they've been engaged with the GEF for many years, but let me tell you, you may go through the same learning process that I just went and realize that there are way more things that we need to learn out of it. So I tend to believe that 6 months 6 months ago, before I entered the GEF, I knew around 30%. Even though that I was appointed. Then a few months after I began the work at the GEF, I thought I knew a lot, but I come to realize that I knew around 50–60% of how the GEF operates. And today, I tend to believe, even though I went through everything that you all know, I tend to believe that I know 85% of the operation. So there is room for more improvement, and I tend to believe that this is the same situation with everybody, regardless of the role or the engagement that they had so far. So that is why we want to have this seminar, and this seminar is extremely important. I will be attending the seminar every single day this week because I want to learn more. Remember, I said I tend to believe I know 85% of how the GEF operates. I need to learn more, and I need to hear the people. I need to hear the people in terms of their expectations, in terms of their needs, in terms of their vision for the future. So that's another very important area. But Peter, just let me give some welcome remarks to our 600 members that are attending today to us from the GEF family, from almost 100 countries. We are blessed by the fact that we got 3 honorable ministers attending today with us from Chad, Maldives, and Nigeria. We got council members and alternatives to our consult. We got a lot of NGOs represented here, more than 40 NGOs for almost 30 countries. And yes, of course, government representatives, particularly operational focal points. And finally, and not least, our dear friends and colleagues for the implementing agencies. But having said this, Peter, I think this is a great opportunity to me to switch into Spanish because I haven't had the pleasure to speak in my native tongue as much as I wish in all my international events, and I'll feel very good if you allow me to do that, Peter. Okay.
Yes, of course, por supuesto, sí, sí.
Muchas gracias, Peter. Let me switch. Okay, in Spanish. Okay. Muchas gracias, Peter. Y muchas gracias a todos que nos acompañan el día de hoy en este seminario de 4 días. Quisiera compartir con ustedes un par de elementos que me parecen tremendamente importantes en el contexto en que nos encontramos y la importancia de este partnership que es el GEF. Ninguno de los que estamos hoy aquí va a estar vivo en 100 años. Nadie. Lo dudo mucho. Por más que hayamos avanzado en el desarrollo de la tecnología de la salud y de la mejora del conocimiento del genoma, no creo que ninguno de los que estén hoy aquí estará vivo en 100 años. Pero todos los que estamos aquí tenemos una responsabilidad para que en la próxima década hagamos cambios sustantivos para que aquellos que vayan a vivir en 100 años puedan tener una calidad de vida. Una calidad de vida donde haya un claro entendimiento entre la relación de los seres humanos, su entorno natural y los medios para satisfacer nuestras necesidades. Y que en ese sentido tenemos una responsabilidad histórica, yo llamaría intrageneracional, para poder sentar la base del modelo económico, modelo de desarrollo, que sea muy diferente al que queremos dejar.
Hey, Carlos Manuel, just to mention, there's a little garbling of your of the sound. We can still understand it. Hopefully, this 5-second pause will allow the system the audio to come back on. So, but perhaps a bit more slowly, given the slight interference. ¿Está bien?
Peter, this has to do with me speaking in English.
It's still there.
Still here.
Yes. I don't know.
It started very well, but now, okay, let me try and continue.
I think
It is on my side, in my mic, or somewhere else.
I think it's on your side. I don't know if everybody else hears the same thing that I am hearing a little bit. Yeah, it's almost like a gurgling.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. I don't know if Ted and Nico, if there's anything we can do on the connections.
Probably I can continue to hear the better.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same gurgling here. And I don't know if we can just try to, disconnect or reconnect, or if there's anything right now on the mics there. Is it basically coming from Carlos's headset?
Yeah.
Maybe
Unplug and
Yes.
plug in the microphone again.
you hear me now.
Can he try and unplug it?
It has kind of a
Can you
science
unplug it?
fiction sound.
Carlos Manuel, try to unplug your headset from the laptop.
Yeah,
That's better. Let's hear. Go ahead and speak a little bit.
okay, I just
Yes.
unplugged my headset.
Yes,
Better?
and now we hear you perfectly.
Oh my God.
Good.
Good. Sorry for that song.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. Yeah.
Okay, I continue in Spanish. So I was saying, yo estaba diciendo que ninguno de nosotros estará en 100 años, pero lo que hagamos en esta década va a tener un alto impacto en cómo vivirán esos nietos o tataranietos nuestros. Por lo tanto, es un momento crítico en la salud de nosotros y la salud de nuestro planeta. Por lo tanto, y reitero, las decisiones que tomemos en la década del 2020 al 2030 son tremendamente importantes y sentarán las bases hacia un nuevo paradigma de desarrollo. Este año es clave en ese contexto de esta década que tenemos, porque este año vamos a tener las grandes reuniones de las partes, de las convenciones de cambio climático, diversidad, la convención de degradación de suelos, químicos. Tendremos una cumbre sobre océanos, una cumbre sobre la alimentación, y el año entrante, pues sin duda tendremos el 50 aniversario de la cumbre de Estocolmo, que pues fue la que generó toda la gobernabilidad ambiental que tenemos en el país. Y no menos importante, este año tenemos el 30 aniversario del GEF. Y quisiera detenerme un segundo aquí para hablar del GEF y lo que han sido estos 30 años en esa visión de qué debe ser el GEF para en los próximos 30 años. Una de las tareas más importantes que yo tengo como CEO del GEF es hacer una evaluación profunda ahora que celebramos 30 años y ver hacia el futuro y pensar qué tiene que ser el GEF, qué tiene que ser el GEF al 2030 y qué tiene que ser el GEF del 2030 al 2050, donde están determinadas las grandes transiciones, los cambios del sistema de consumo y producción y cuál es el rol que juega el GEF. Y si veo hacia el pasado, creo que el GEF como una asociación de países ha sido tremendamente exitosa. Hemos ayudado de muchas y diferentes maneras a los países, alrededor de 171 países donde hemos trabajado, pero no solamente países, sino también la sociedad civil. Y hemos hecho cosas tremendamente positivas que han tenido impactos diversos o varios en muchos países. El impacto del GEF en los países está correlacionado a las capacidades nacionales. Y de ahí que eso es algo muy importante que debemos entender. Y en términos de capacidades nacionales, hay grandes asimetrías. Hay países que sin duda tienen una gran capacidad institucional y humana y hay otros que no. Y que en ese contexto el GEF, a través de muchos mecanismos, trata de ayudar a aquellos países con mayores limitaciones y se trata de generar mayor impacto. De aquí la importancia hacia el futuro de poder trabajar mucho más de cerca, teniendo más claro las necesidades operativas de los puntos operativos de GEF a nivel de los países. El GEF, como ustedes saben, es una partnership que es una cadena y sin duda el eslabón más débil en la cadena son los puntos focales operativos. Los otros eslabones son la Secretaría, el Consejo, las agencias implementadoras, pero definitivamente, y ahora en una época de COVID, es evidente que el eslabón más débil en esta cadena son los puntos operativos del GEF, y que aun cuando hay una presunción de un acuerdo no escrito de que la operación del punto operativo nacional es una responsabilidad de los gobiernos, pues nosotros en el GEF y en el contexto del GEF 8 estamos pensando cómo seguimos avanzando en nuestro Country Support Program que trabaja con los puntos focales operativos para poder apoyarlos muchísimo más para que así los proyectos que lleguen al GEF reflejen mejor las prioridades y los procesos internos entre los gobiernos, sector privado y la sociedad civil y grupos de interés como campesinos, mujeres y comunidades indígenas, pero que también el punto operativo tenga una mayor capacidad de supervisión, de monitoreo y de reporte de los proyectos que se vienen implementando. Y hoy en día vemos que pues, los puntos focales operativos tienen grandísimas limitaciones, ya que la pandemia afecta y seguirá afectando a los países por los próximos años. Entonces, decía que si vemos al pasado del GEF, hemos hecho cosas muy importantes. En algunos países las cosas han avanzado más que en otros por las razones que les explicaba, y aquí hay un gran interés de comprender cómo luchamos con ese reto de las asimetrías y empezamos a nivelar el impacto que generamos, pero hay que ser muy claros y muy sinceros al decir que aun cuando hemos hecho cosas muy interesantes y cambios muy importantes, al final del día, en estos 30 años, no hemos cambiado los rumbos de este sistema irracional e insostenible de consumo y producción. Seguimos viendo la pérdida de bosques, seguimos viendo la contaminación de plásticos en los océanos, seguimos viendo el problema de sustancias contaminantes afectando las fuentes de agua, seguimos perdiendo bosques y biodiversidad y seguimos liberando emisiones de carbono y la agenda de adaptación sigue siendo una agenda lenta. Entonces, en el GEF tenemos muy claro, ahora que vemos estos grandes, la posibilidad de grandes acuerdos y metas y objetivos políticos en este año 2021, en las diferentes COPs, con una visión al 2030, en el inicio del GEF del refinanciamiento del GEF 8, vemos cómo tenemos una oportunidad para poder acompañar y apoyar a los países de una manera mucho más estratégica que posiblemente lo hemos hecho en el pasado. Y aun y cuando hace un par de ciclos atrás en el GEF 6 empezó el programa de impacto y empezamos a tener una mayor integración entre las ventanas de financiamiento tradicional del GEF con los programas de impacto, que como el nombre lo dice, quiere generar impactos transformadores. Tenemos dos grandes retos a nivel de los países. Y los dos retos tienen que ver con un tema que yo llamo de coherencia política. Nosotros requerimos, por lo tanto, con una limitada capacidad de financiamiento, concentrarnos en entender cuáles son las grandes barreras que tenemos a nivel de los diferentes países para poder impactar de una manera más grande, para poder amplificar las cosas que hemos hecho positivamente, y encontramos dos grandes retos. Uno es el reto institucional, en el sentido de que los gobiernos se han organizado en instituciones, sean agencias, ministerios o secretarías, que tienen responsabilidades, pero muy concretas y muy específicas por sectores, y que por lo tanto su planificación y la inversión de las instituciones públicas en los países trabaja en silos o en sectores sin la posibilidad de poder generar planificación política pública y presupuesto con una visión más del paisaje, sea el paisaje marino o terrestre. Lo que quiero decir es que la institucionalidad pública en nuestros gobiernos se convierte en una barrera a poder generar impactos de más alta escala en nuestro esfuerzo de sostenibilidad, ya que las instituciones han sido diseñadas, la institucionalidad ha sido diseñada para trabajar en sectores, y que aquí tenemos que romper esa tendencia a mirar solo sectores, en donde el sector agrícola solo ve la producción de alimentos, el sector de conservación solo ve el manejo de recursos naturales silvestres, y en el medio no hay ninguna comunión ni una visión. O tenemos el sector de conservación y el sector de minería y de energía, particularmente sustentado en combustibles fósiles, y ahí no hay ninguna convergencia, y así vemos muchos conflictos sobre uso del suelo a nivel de los paisajes, porque esa visión está totalmente sectorializada y no hay ninguna integración. Y ahí vemos una gran necesidad para que los países puedan avanzar si el GEF contribuye a través de generar información y propiciar diálogos políticos que nos ayudan. Y la otra gran barrera es el tema que tiene que ver con la movilización de recursos financieros de todas las diferentes fuentes para lograr los grandes objetivos ambientales. Nosotros en el GEF, para que ustedes tengan una idea, aun y cuando de manera anual invertimos alrededor de $1.000 millones, y para todos ustedes $1.000 millones puede sonar muchísima plata, eso es muy poco. Eso es muy poco comparado al reto global de movilización de recursos naturales. El GEF moviliza el 0.5% de todos los recursos para conservación de biodiversidad de manera anual de todas las diferentes fuentes. El 80% de la inversión en biodiversidad a nivel anual lo hacen los gobiernos en sus países a través de presupuestos públicos. El 20% es cooperación internacional, sea multilateral o bilateral, y sector privado, y ahí es en donde el GEF está. Aún lo anterior, y siendo la institución que más financia acciones para conservar biodiversidad, solo financiamos el 0.5% de lo que se invierte a nivel del planeta. Entonces, nosotros en el GEF tenemos muy claro que aunque podemos duplicar la cantidad de nuestro fondo patrimonial, pasamos de invertir 1.000 millones a 2.000 millones, que no cambiaremos el panorama que estamos confrontados. Y que para poder tener un impacto más grande, tenemos que trabajar a nivel de los países en este tema que yo les llamaba de falta de coherencia política. Por lo tanto, el primer tema para abordar que tiene que ver con la necesidad de mayor coherencia política tiene que ser el tema de plantearnos una nueva institucionalidad para el desarrollo sostenible. No podemos lograr los objetivos climáticos, los objetivos de sostenibilidad, de biodiversidad, con la misma infraestructura institucional que en primer lugar ha creado el problema que hoy queremos resolver. Y los países que hemos visto que han hecho avances importantes en los temas de sostenibilidad es porque han venido rompiendo esta falla institucional en los países y les ha ayudado. Y podría entrar en muchos detalles, pero no es el momento. El segundo tema y la segunda barrera que vemos es el tema, como decía yo, de movilización de recursos. Los fondos GEF tienen que ayudar a los países a movilizar más eficientemente recursos financieros domésticos. ¿Por qué? Porque la solución financiera de la sostenibilidad se va a dar en una combinación de fondos de cooperación internacional que disparen procesos y catalicen actividades a nivel de país para que esos países hagan una inversión más racional y más balanceada de los presupuestos públicos. En la gran mayoría de los países donde el GEF trabaja e invierte, esos mismos gobiernos invierten muchas veces recursos financieros en actividades que generan la destrucción del medio ambiente, pérdida de biodiversidad o cambio climático, que lo que ellos invierten en conservación de naturaleza o en acciones climáticas. Y eso es un gran reto que tenemos todos nosotros. El GEF, por lo tanto, al no tener 100.000 millones de dólares cada 4 años, pues tiene que ser muy inteligente en cómo moviliza recursos que ayuden a generar condiciones que superemos esos dos retos que tenemos a nivel de los países. Así que en este momento estamos entrando en el nuevo replenishment, que es el nuevo financiamiento. La semana pasada tuvimos la reunión técnica asesora, donde reunimos alrededor de 500 expertos y científicos y que sientan las bases de la ciencia y el conocimiento de los temas en donde el GEF debe seguir trabajando y focalizarse y temas que tiene que abordar de una manera innovadora. Y para concluir, quisiera hablarles un poquito del GEF 8 y también del GEF 9, que me parece que es tremendamente importante porque no pueden ir separados. Como les dije anteriormente, tenemos una década para que aquellos que vayan a vivir en 100 años tengan la misma calidad o mejor que la que tenemos nosotros, y que en ese sentido tenemos que ver el GEF 8 y el GEF 9 como un tándem, como un esfuerzo complementario para lograr los objetivos del 2030. Y para nosotros, habiendo tenido esta reunión de científicos y expertos hace una semana o hace 2 semanas atrás, nos queda muy claro que los objetivos políticos del GEF 8 van en las siguientes líneas. 1, el GEF 8 tiene que concentrarse primordialmente en nuestro interés político que responde a las solicitudes de los países recipientes de ayudarles a ellos en su recuperación post pandemia. Esa recuperación tiene que ser una recuperación verde, azul, limpia y resiliente. Y ese es como el objetivo principal, y que en ese sentido para nosotros no requiere hacer una transformación interna en nuestros programas para ayudarles a los países a esa recuperación azul, verde, limpia y resiliente. Ya lo hemos venido haciendo porque venimos trabajando en los temas de sostenibilidad y principalmente trabajando en usar la naturaleza como un medio costo eficiente para lograr los objetivos de desarrollo. Pero que, aún lo anterior, hemos, tanto en el TAC como en un grupo de científicos que tuvimos el año pasado, que nos prepararon y nos aconsejaron en el contexto del COVID-19, vamos a concentrarnos en el GEF 8 en acciones muy concretas y principalmente a través de soluciones basadas en naturalezas, en lo urbano, como en lo rural, como en el océano, para ayudarles a los países a que esa recuperación sea una recuperación muy diferente a lo que podría ser. Aún lo anterior, yo vengo siguiendo políticamente los planes de reactivación y estímulo económico a nivel del mundo y veo con muchísima preocupación que muchos de esos planes es más de lo mismo, más de lo mismo que teníamos antes del COVID, donde se sustenta esa recuperación en más explotación de hidrocarburos, en más cambio de uso de suelo y en más contaminación. Apenas un 30% de los planes de estímulo, que son planes de muy corto plazo, donde un gobierno es apoyado por una cooperación financiera internacional de desarrollo o por la banca comercial, apenas un 30% está diseñada en términos que consideraríamos un plan de estímulo verde. Pero bueno, los planes de estímulo son ayudas muy de corto plazo, pero sin duda marca una tendencia y esa tendencia nos dice que los gobiernos en esa recuperación post-COVID y las agencias financieras, sean bancos de desarrollo o bancos comerciales, pues no tienen muy claro cómo debe ser esa inversión que es azul, verde, resiliente y limpia. Y de aquí que el GEF puede jugar un papel muy importante. El segundo elemento que creo que es trascendental en el GEF 8 es poder traer este concepto como un tema transversal que tiene que ver con el concepto de One Health, una sola salud. Es un concepto que se venía desarrollando al margen de la realidad socioeconómica y hoy toma más fuerza. One Health habla sobre un solo sistema de salud que trae en conjunto a 3 sistemas, que tiene que ver con la salud humana, con la salud del planeta y con la salud de los animales que los seres humanos usamos para nuestra alimentación. Hoy tenemos que traer hoy en tiempos de una pandemia y entendiendo que esta pandemia puede ser el principio de un ciclo de múltiples pandemias producto de la relación disfuncional entre los seres humanos y la naturaleza, que este concepto de One Health tiene que ser un elemento fundamental, ya que debemos hacer inversiones que de manera transversal nos ayuden a contribuir en la mejora, en la salud, no solo de los seres humanos, no solo del planeta, sino de los animales domésticos que usamos. Y cuando hablamos de animales domésticos, yo quisiera darles 2 datos que les pueden dar a ustedes una imagen de qué estamos hablando. Hoy el 70% de las aves que existen en este planeta son gallinas o aves domésticas. Solo el 30% son aves silvestres, en términos del total de números. Por lo tanto, las aves domésticas para consumo de los seres humanos son 3 o 4 veces la cantidad de aves silvestres que tienen en el planeta. Y el que un patógeno, un virus, pueda saltar de un ave a un ser humano ha pasado muchas veces en el pasado y tenemos que evitar que siga pasando en el futuro. Si vemos el tema de los mamíferos, si tomamos todos los mamíferos del planeta, el 96% de los mamíferos del planeta somos nosotros los seres humanos y todos los mamíferos, animales domésticas, sean vacas, cerdos, caballos, etcétera. Por lo tanto, solo el 4% de los mamíferos de este planeta son animales silvestres. El jaguar, el tapir, el elefante, la jirafa. Solo 4%. A ese nivel de desbalance. Por lo tanto, el tema de One Health es tremendamente importante y el GEF no puede ser un actor lejano o distante de la Organización Mundial de la Salud y otros. La Organización Mundial de la Salud ha entendido que si no paramos la deforestación, el cambio de uso de suelo el tráfico ilegal de vida silvestre y el consumo de animales de vida silvestre, seguiremos siendo muy vulnerables a futuras pandemias, y de ahí que en el GEF tenemos encontramos que tenemos un nicho tremendamente importante. Yo quisiera concluir con dos mensajes. Uno, el GEF ha sido un partnership del cual todos tenemos que sentirnos muy orgullosos. Hemos hecho muchas cosas, pero no hemos sido un agente de cambio a nivel global. Y tenemos esta década para convertirnos en un agente de cambio a nivel mundial, porque no hay otra organización que tiene el mandato que tiene el GEF. Y que en ese sentido, el GEF tiene que pasar de jugar en la segunda división a pasar a jugar en la en la primera división, donde las grandes decisiones políticas se toman. El GEF ha sido el gran campeón de la segunda división, pero nunca está ubicado allá. Y esto es evidente. Muchos presidentes, muchos jefes de Estado, muchas líderes del sector privado no saben qué es el GEF a nivel del planeta. Es más, el otro día estaba oyendo a don John Kerry hablando de los retos de cambio climático, y hablaba del Fondo Verde y cómo hay que financiar el Fondo Verde en $100,000 millones, y no habló nada del GEF, porque no lo conoce, aun y cuando somos lo que somos. Entonces, tenemos que pasar de ser un actor o un jugador de la segunda división a jugar en la Premier League. Y para eso tenemos que entender cuál es nuestro rol, cuál es nuestro nicho y cuál es el valor agregado que le podemos dar a la primera división. ¿Qué es la primera división del mundo y de la sostenibilidad? Bueno, la primera división es donde los gobiernos, jefes de Estado, ministros de finanzas, conjuntamente con los presidentes y los consejos de los bancos de desarrollo multilateral y las agencias de cooperación multilateral, determinan a través de varios fondos grandes cómo invertir en desarrollo humano. Y el mejor ejemplo es este fondo que hay en el Banco Mundial, que se llama IDA, que es un fondo que está diseñado para ayudar a unos 75, 80 países muy pobres, muy vulnerables en desarrollo humano, y que la movilización de recursos en esos fondos es sustantiva. Y yo siempre he dicho que el GEF recibe los residuos de esas otras negociaciones, ya que los donantes del GEF son los mismos donantes que se dan en esos grandes países. Y que por lo tanto tenemos que dar el salto a estar en esas otras grandes negociaciones globales, donde el GEF debe ser considerado el socio natural para garantizar la sostenibilidad en la inversión en desarrollo humano. Y que en ese sentido esa tarea es importante, y duraremos 10 años en llegar a ser un jugador de la primera división, pero tenemos que empezar ya. Y tenemos que empezar ya con una clara narrativa y claros objetivos en el refinanciamiento del GEF 8, y siento yo que vamos en buen camino desde el punto de vista conceptual, desde el punto de vista teórico. Y mi último mensaje, Peter, le prometo que ese es el último. Para que podamos ser un jugador de la primera división, para poder tener un replenishment positivo, todos ustedes tienen que conocer perfectamente cómo trabaja el GEF, porque yo siento que subutilizamos las capacidades que tiene el GEF para hacer más cosas a nivel de los países. No solo hacer más, sino hacerlo mejor. Y creo yo que a través del Country Support Program y otras iniciativas como este seminario, entenderemos aún mejor cómo opera el GEF y cómo podemos sacar provecho del GEF. Yo les decía anteriormente que yo he trabajado desde el gobierno de Costa Rica por casi 30 años cerca del GEF, y creía yo que lo conocía, y no es sino ahora que estoy dentro del GEF que me doy cuenta cuánto no conozco yo del GEF, y me recrimino el no haber sabido mucho de esto antes, porque hubiera hecho más cosas desde el punto de vista de el gobierno de Costa Rica. Conocer mejor, entender bien la operación del GEF y cómo optimizar esos recursos es importante, siempre entendiendo que eso solo funciona si tenemos puntos focales operativos fuertes. Y aquí el GEF se va a comprometer a hacer un esfuerzo adicional en el GEF 8 para apoyar más fuertemente las necesidades básicas operativas de los puntos focales operativos. Pero a la misma vez, yo requiero, desde el GEF, yo requiero mayor consistencia y coherencia política de los gobiernos en apoyar la tarea que tiene ese punto operativo focal a nivel de los países. Yo entiendo las complejidades que hay a nivel de los gobiernos, pero necesitamos muchísima estabilidad y muchísima consistencia de parte de los gobiernos para que el esfuerzo que hoy hace el GEF en ese trabajo con los puntos focales operativos y lo que queremos aumentar al futuro sea tremendamente exitoso. Así que pues muchísimas gracias por la posibilidad de participar el día de hoy. Yo tengo que desconectarme para ir a un evento de UNEA, donde están los ministros de Medio Ambiente, pero después regresaré. Y sin duda, al final del seminario me gustaría pues tener tal vez una sesión de intercambio donde ustedes le puedan preguntar al CEO todo lo que ustedes quieran en razón de lo que acabo de decir, en razón de lo que van a ver por estos 3 días o por cualquier otra razón, cualquier tema que ustedes tengan a bien. Así que pues, muchísimas gracias a todos, muchísimo éxito y de parte del GEF, el mayor compromiso de seguir trabajando fuerte en razón de este sentido de responsabilidad que tenemos para aquellos que van a estar aquí en 100 años y que nuestra tarea es poder crear los cimientos y la base de un nuevo desarrollo para que esa gente que hoy no ha nacido pues vea anecdóticamente lo que pasamos en la década 2020-2030. Muchas gracias, Peter. Buenos días, buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias, Carlos Manuel. Thank you so very much. Wow, let us all take a little bit of a breath here. That was such a wonderful way to launch us into our sessions, the warm welcome and giving us the foundations for our discussion, the strategic framework, the orientation for action. We're so very grateful. As Carlos Manuel mentioned, he will be here throughout, but also at the end for questions and answers. So we'll have a dialogue opportunity. I just took a few notes from the discussions, which you all just have heard. We're at a critical moment right now, this next decade, 2020 to 2030. It's so important, meetings of conventions, the 30th anniversary of the GEF. Look to where we need to be is an idea here. We can be proud of the many successes we've achieved over the years and the importance of the role of all of the partners in this critical role of the operational focal points to keep us going. But the pressures, as we know from the science and from the words of Carlos Manuel, remain very high. We're still facing unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. And so now going into GEF 8 and thinking GEF 8 to GEF 9, we have a major need, responsibility, and opportunity to advance. And Carlos Manuel walked us through a couple of main areas where we can concentrate and amplify our impacts, this institutional dimension to break the silos of institutions and sectors to get to higher impact, integrated thinking, sustainability, the key importance of mobilizing funds. And then in the last part, GEF 8 and GEF 9, let's look at them together. We have some critical political goals to respond to recovery requests of countries. I love this theme of the green, blue, clean, and resilient recovery. Let's focus on concrete actions so we can go beyond business as usual. The stimulus plans, the trend so far is not really green, blue, clean, and resilient. So that's a very crucial thing, and the GEF can play a role in hopefully diving into that and helping on that correction. We have the One Health approach with COVID-19 has shown a light on this relationship between people and nature, working together for health and the environment with partners like the World Health Organization. And the final concluding message is that we have a lot to be proud of but we have to do more. We have to reach into this first division. When political people like John Kerry and others speak, we want them to recognize the role of the GEF. We need to be in there. There's so much we can do. And a key of that is this, one of the themes of the GEF and the Country Support Program, which we will talk about in this session, is the critical role of operational focal points. There is a huge role and responsibility to them, but maybe underused. We need to, there's a work to empower in that role, and that we need to also know ourselves and what is our full potential, because maybe we're not at all getting to our full potential. And let us see that these kinds of sessions and our work together, our country support program, can help us know who we are. And as we look ahead, help us build into the stronger GEF that we need to be. So Carlos Manuel, thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. We will let you go off to the United Nations Environment Assembly sessions, if I think that's where you might be going now. And I see on the chat, we will talk more about the One Health approach. I think maybe we can have that as we go through the discussions, but now we can keep going in the agenda, if we may, and let us all just, again, take a breath. I needed a breath after listening to that. Thank you again, Carlos Manuel.
Thanks, Peter. Pleasure.
All right, very good. Keep all of these thoughts in mind as we go through these next discussions, and then keep them in mind as we get to the questions. We'll have the dialogue with Carlos Manuel later on. Now let me turn, I think we're just a little bit close to being on time now, to our next session, which is entitled Midway Past GEF 7, Where Do We Stand? I'm going to turn to Françoise Clotte. She is one of our two directors in the GEF Secretariat. She's the director of our Policy, Partnership, and Operations portfolio and work in the Secretariat, which works together with the programming side. And as you can see from the agenda, this is an overall introduction about GEF 7 results, resource allocation, and the quality of the portfolio, with a focus on progress so far. So let's take stock of where we are. Françoise, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Buenos dias and bonjour à tous. As you can probably see on the screen, we are 550 connecting from 100 countries. And it's really a delightful experience for us at the GEF Secretariat as we endeavor to work with you in the next few days to have all of you here. Let me also acknowledge the participation of the three ministers from Nigeria, Chad, and Maldives, with special salutation to Minister Abdullah Nasir of the Maldives, with whom I had the pleasure of working before. As mentioned, within the GEF Secretariat, I'm in charge of policy, partnership, and operations. And that's why I'm particularly glad to address such a large and diverse group of new partners. Not all of you are new, obviously, but many of you are. And for many of you, it is really the first ever contact with the GEF Secretariat directly. You will see half of the GEF Secretariat probably over the next 3 days in various interactions. And as you know, because the GEF is a partnership, by joining this, you are all partners, and we are delighted to welcome you as partners. Obviously, any partnership works better when members share values, objectives, ambitions, and responsibilities. And that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit in the context of where we are in GEF 7, but also in the context of whom we are as the GEF when we work together, because that is what makes the texture of what we do together. So what does it mean that we have policies and that we work as a partnership and that we have rules and procedures and guidelines around operations, right? Well, what it means is we have to design and enforce an environment in which we can shape our joint activities, right? Our operational policies, our guidelines, our procedure in an engagement that involves countries, that involves agencies, both GEF agencies, the 18 agencies that work with us, and national agencies in charge of execution. And that within this partnership, we put our best effort together. So let me backtrack a little bit and say the following, right? GEF resources, as you know, are official development aid resources. And what does that mean? It means they come from taxpayers of the GEF donors countries, which include some donors only, but also some donors and recipient countries, right? So they come from this global solidarity, which is recognizing the need to act collectively on global environmental challenges, and they are hard to come by. Let me say that again, they are hard to come by, right? Now, more than ever, because we have, fiscal crises all over and high level of indebtedness, etc. So we're spending currently the resources of GEF 7, and we're trying to raise the resources of GEF 8. And it's very important to think about that as we design how we work together, right? These are scarce resources. Few ODA resources are provided through grants nowadays, right? And although we have country allocations, it is a privilege and not an entitlement for countries to get access to these resources, right? It is a privilege for the agencies. Some of you come from countries, some of you come from agencies. It is a privilege for the agencies, for GEF agencies who implement and for national agencies who execute, to get access to these resources and to participate into the delivery of results, right? And of course, it comes with obligations. It is a privilege as well for the GEF Secretariat to mediate that relationship and try to optimize what we collectively do with those resources, right? So what are our obligations in this context? And that ties into what you are going to hear in this session after I stop talking, right? Well, our first obligation, actually, we'll talk about perhaps more tomorrow. It is to do no harm, right? Not to the environment, obviously, which we are here to serve, nor to people and communities who engage with us in countries, indigenous communities included, nor to resources which are provided to us in trust by donors under the form of grant, right? And this duty of care to protect environment, people, and resources is absolutely essential to the GEF partnership. Around this, we share values and we share accountability. And it's very important for you joining this new partnership to actually be aware of that and be party to it, right? That is why, in fact, we have many policies and guidelines to make sure that we are all mindful of this very first obligation that we have in common, which is to do no harm, right? That's why we have safeguard rules to prevent any harm to community, individuals, and environment, to make sure that communities are engaged, that they are consulted, that they are associated, that they are brought and treated with in a fair and respectful and empowering way, right? That they can complain and report and be heard when things go wrong and when needed, right? That is also why we have fiduciary requirements, budget rules, reporting obligations to secure that resources are spent in line with the intended and approved purpose. That's also why we have a secured flow of funds that we can all account for transparently, and that we have processes when things go wrong to address those issues, right? So our first joint obligation, as you join this partnership, as you engage with us in GEF 7 and after that in GEF 8, is really to do no harm. But here's my main invitation. Do not ever think about policies or guidelines or procedures of the GEF as bureaucracy, as a burden, as rules, as obligations. Do not use this terminology that I really don't like, which is cost of doing business, which is a fairly horrible expression. It may not be easy always to interact with all these requirements, but these requirements all have a very important purpose. And behind that purpose are the joint values that we share as we join the GEF partnership. They are the responsibilities and the accountability we take on. And that's why it is, in fact, so important, right? So our first obligation is to do no harm. But obviously, doing no harm is a minimum. And above and beyond that, we do have an ambition. We have a very important ambition, as you have heard from Carlos Manuel. In fact, he used the words hacer más y hacerlo mejor, right? Which is in French, faire plus et le faire mieux. and in English, do more and do it better, right? That's really what he gave us as an objective. And, you know, we have scarce resources, they're hard to come by. We had this obligation to do the best out of it, right? So our real obligation at all levels of the partnership is no less than doing the very best that we can collectively together with the resources that we are privileged to receive. And I'd like to talk about this very briefly, because this is going to be one of the objects of the next session and the next three speakers, groups of speakers that you will hear. In the GEF partnership, as I said, we share values, we share objectives, and we share ambition. And our ambition is to do the best and go much beyond doing no harm, right? And that is why we measure results. You are going to hear in a moment Cyril presenting how we do this. It is very difficult, of course, to measure results, especially across such a broad partnership, right? And across such a tremendous large menu of activities. But it is essential to do it as well as we can, and to do it in a way that is rigorous and accountable, right? Why is it important? Because we want to make sure that projects materialize the benefits expected. We want to learn from what works better, and we want also to learn from what doesn't work, so that we know how to improve and how to move forward, right? We want to be able to report back to donors very concretely on the results accrued. And you will hear from Cyril that we have made much progress in GEF 7 along those lines by introducing with GEF 7 a new result framework and spending a lot of time interacting across the partnership to secure the adoption of that framework, and that it is now beginning to provide us with much more visibility in terms of the footprint of what we're doing, right? But that is also why we track efficiency and effectiveness, right? Because it's also about doing better, hacerlo mejor, faire mieux, right? And that's the second presentation you will hear in a moment by Cyril, Henry, and Jonathan. And of course, yes, we want to learn what works well, we want to require improvement, and we want to address issues, right? We want a portfolio of projects that is well managed, right? We want action to be taken when needed. And remember, it is a privilege and not a right to use GEF resources. It creates obligations. It creates obligations in terms of trustworthiness, obligations in terms of diligence, doing things fast, acting diligently on problems. It creates an obligation of best effort on the use of these resources. It creates an obligation of problem solving, right? We cannot sit on problems. We have to make sure that our portfolio approach to managing projects is one of speed, diligence, and efficiency. So we'll hear about this as well. And of course, we need to be very strategic about the use of resources. And you will hear from Sonja and Nain how we're making sure that country allocation resources, country allocation within the GEF Secretariat respond to a solid logic, which is not a decision by the Secretariat, but an underpinning logic that favors where very important natural assets are located, where that favors performance, that favors also need to a point, right? So you will hear about how we approach this allocation in order to share resources, which is an essential part of what we do within our partnership. You will hear tomorrow about, along the same lines and the same logic, about many other aspects of how we work together and we improve our way of doing business with the ambition of doing more and doing it better, right? While we need to maximize resources around the GEF grant once we have it, to maximize the result footprint. And that's essentially the co-financing objective, right? Bringing other resources around a grant to enhance the footprint of the project, right? You will hear about how we monitor policy and policy compliance, and with the view of making sure that we have uniformity in the way we approach, and we all channel for our projects what we have learned from the experience of the GEF. And you will hear about how we harness, curate, and disseminate knowledge, among other things, right? So let me repeat the main message here, because if there's one idea here to leave behind, right, none of these policies, guidelines, and procedures that we are implementing within GEF7, many of them being new and adopted in the past 2 to 3 years, none of them are about bureaucracy. All of them are about doing the maximum with what we have and doing it in a way that is transparent, that is accountable, that is diligent, and that is generous to others in the partnership. It is very much about sharing. It is about how we share our joint knowledge. It's about how we share our joint talent and commitment to each other across the partnership. And it is about how we share scarce resources for global impact, right? So let me stop here and once more welcome you to this partnership of values and commitment that we all embody within the GEF. It really is a pleasure for us to welcome 550 of you. Usually when we do this face-to-face, we have about 80 people who can afford a trip to Washington. And so it's an incredible opportunity that we have today and over the next 4 days to spend that much time with you and to make sure that we get questions from you and we have that conversation, and also we share with you the knowledge of how we're implementing GEF7 under this new set of policy and how we're moving forward to think about GEF8. Thank you very much and welcome again.
Thank you very much, Françoise, for framing this part of our discussion and the bigger picture of the importance of policies and operations. And it's not a bureaucracy, but the critical part of who we are and what we do to get to results and using resources well. So let us then follow through on the introduction by Françoise with the 3 speakers and presentations we have in this session. We have first, I have Cyril, which you can see from the agenda, getting to results in the GEF7 architecture. How do we know we are there? Cyril, are you there?
I am. Hi, how are you, Peter?
The floor is yours. And we will have questions and answers after the three presentations, which will come consecutively according to the agenda. Go, Cyril, please.
Great. Well, hi everyone, and very good to be here with you. I'm excited to be with you to present the GEF results framework. And let me start by saying that at the end of the day, we don't measure the GEF impact by the number of projects it approves or the size of our portfolio. No, we measure it by gauging how well the GEF partnership delivers environmental benefits to the planet. I hear an echo. Do you? No. Okay.
I think we're okay. And let me just, by the way, introduce you, Cyril. Cyril is in the GEF Secretariat working in the shop of Françoise, the PP Policy Partnership and Operations. He's our lead on results and on monitoring. I think yeah, there is a bit of an echo. So if folks could mute their microphone while we have the discussion, that would be really great. Cyril.
Peter, 1 second. I'm going to mute everybody one more time, okay?
Very good.
Before
Cyril, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Cyril, you have to unmute. Hold on a second.
And that's Christina, by the way.
Oh. Okay, right. Cyril, now you have to mute.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Christina, and thanks everyone. So what I was saying is that we're measuring results to gauge how well the GEF partnership delivers what it promises to do, which is environmental benefits to the planet. And I'm here to tell you why we are measuring results, the metrics we are tracking, and how we use the data. And you'll see what this means for you when designing new GEF finance projects. And a lot of what you'll see relates to targets and indicators. If you can move to the next slide, please. But what I want to make clear in this presentation, and maybe if you could move to the next slide, please. Yeah, the following one again. One more slide, please. Yeah, so I was saying a lot of what you'll see in this presentation relates to targets and indicators. But what I want to make clear as I start is that the focus on results that we have serves a bigger purpose. It's about achieving better value for money on the ground in countries. It's about being selective in our focus. The GEF works around a defined set of priorities, so we are selective in what we fund. And it's about increasing our impact. And we know that the level of ambition that we have set can only be achieved with you, with partners. But it's also a vision that is grounded on evidence and that subjects the GEF to more scrutiny. And the goals that the GEF has in terms of achieving results, well, they form the apex of how we organize ourselves to deliver on our objectives, our corporate objectives. And we call those goals the core indicators. We have targets for them. And as François just mentioned, achieving results is why we design policies. More than doing no harm, we're trying to do better and we're trying to reach better outcomes. And all the policies and guidance you'll hear about in the coming 4 days exist to achieve stronger results. So bear that in mind when you hear about the stakeholder policy. It's about bringing together stakeholders to reach better outcomes. What you see here on this slide is that results is not new at the GEF. We started few replenishment cycles ago with comprehensive and complex tracking tools covering a wide range of indicators at project levels. And we have moved over time to what we believe is a more effective approach, a simplified approach. And this has lessened the reporting efforts on agencies and countrysides significantly. And the gains have been tremendous for the partnership. It has strengthened the GEF ability to report on results a lot. And let us turn our focus to today, the current approach. About 3 years ago, during the GEF 7 replenishment, the GEF chose to significantly streamline its set of indicators and ensure clarity in their use. And we also, in addition to a streamlined set of core indicators, defined socioeconomic benefits that we started to track. But let's take a look at these indicators. They reflect the most important and common areas of work. And you can see how they cut across our focal areas of programming. We have set targets for most of these indicators in GEF 7. And I'll show you the progress to date in a minute, so bear with me. So you'll see where we stand in GEF 7. And each new project that you will be designing or are currently working on, from now on, must include at least one of these indicators. So it's a very important consideration when designing your projects. And it's also something that we look at very carefully. We know it's not straightforward, right? Finding the right indicator that's the right fit for your project. And a good starting point to go about this is to look at the guidelines and technical definitions that we've made available for you on our websites. But as I show you this streamlined set of indicators, I want to be clear. Projects achieve a lot more than these indicators. That's why each project also prepares a full-fledged results framework, because we need to track those results that help achieve core indicators. And in addition to the 11 main core indicators you just saw, we also use sub and contextual indicators. Here you have an example for chemicals and waste. But we also focus on achieving results that support gender equality, because we know that, put it simply, without greater equality between men and women, the world will not meet its environment objective. So that's why our operations are increasingly designed to create opportunities that benefit the women of the world. And we track this in GEF projects. But let's now turn to the last part of our presentation. As I mentioned earlier on, we have set targets for GEF 7. And these objectives are ambitious. In fact, they stretch the partnership's capacity. And the truth is, the GEF needs to be ambitious if it is to realize its aspirations to protect the world environment. We also believe those targets are achievable. And the reason is because they are based on a clear vision and trajectory of implementation. The publication you see on the screen, the GEF Corporate Scorecard, is where we report on progress to date. So let's look at this progress. The good news is that we are making progress to achieve these targets. Here you have a snapshot of 5 of those indicators, or 6. We see, for example, that the GEF has already met its target for restoring land and is making also progress in its target to mitigate greenhouse gas emission and in other areas. Here, what you see is a collective progress to date from the project approved in GEF 7. So a lot of progress has already taken place as we stand past midway in this replenishment cycle. But more importantly, what this means is not indicators, right? It's about the collective impact of GEF finance projects and about how those projects are transforming the ecosystems and the lives of the people. So now we've talked a lot about why results matter, what we track, but here we'll discuss briefly the how. How do projects use core indicators, and when do we expect them to report to the GEF? What you see on the screens are the 4 milestones in a project life cycle that relates to results reporting. During preparation, there are 2 instances where projects indicate tentative and then final targets. We want project to tell us how much of these indicators and of those results they will be able to achieve. And we ask that at the project identification stage, so at concept stage, and then when the project becomes CO endorsed, at which point we expect final expected results and a justification informed by preparation. And on the right side of the table, you see that during implementation, projects report on actual results, results that actually materialized on the ground. And this takes place at 2 important milestones. One, midway through the project at the midterm review, and eventually at completion with the terminal evaluation. And all of this helps the GEF demonstrate that projects are achieving the results they committed to deliver with the resources the GEF Council and trusted countries and agencies to use effectively. I cannot stress how important it is. It is more than accountability. It is about achieving impact. It's about learning from those results. And as I close this presentation, let me do just a quick recap of what this all means for you as you design and manage GEF finance projects. Well, first, it means focusing on select outcomes and be thorough about measuring them. But it also means not only setting the right level of expected results, but also working toward achieving them on the ground so they deliver the right benefits. And finally, it also means analyzing and being accountable for the shared results achieved by the partnership so that the learnings that is garnered through this exercise can feed into the design of new projects. And with this, I'll thank you very much and give the floor back to Peter.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Much appreciated. So this is part 1 of our, I think, our sort of 3-part presentation in this session. So I suggest we continue now to part 2, which is portfolio performance. How do we use GEF resources efficiently and effectively? And I understand, Cyril, you will continue with this. We also have, as you see on the program, Henry, who is our lead in the Secretariat on Operations, working also in the office, in the section of Françoise, as well as Jonathan, who is the GEF Secretariat lead on policies, again, under the Françoise. So Cyril, will you start again this part 2, or will one of your partners?
I'm happy to give it a start and then pass it on to Jonathan and Henry, if they'd like to.
Very good. As you wish. Please let us keep going.
All right, wonderful. Well, so thanks to be again with you. So by now we've established that results is the end goal of what we do. And what we'll be looking at now is how the GEF is working with countries and with agencies to ensure projects reach environmental results on the ground, on time, and with quality. And the purpose of this presentation is to tell you how we track the progress of your projects and what matters when you do that. But the presentation also aims to tell you about the tools we have set up to share analysis on how your portfolio is doing and what areas are falling behind, so you can act on it. But let's take first a look at where we are today and why it matters to monitor portfolio progress. So today, the portfolio of GEF Finance projects under implementation amounts to 4.4 billion. This is significant, it's huge. And we have a special responsibility to deliver these 900 projects with efficiency. That's why we are looking to, That's why we are looking to boost our shared impact. This is no easy task, knowing that the GEF, with its global reach, is implementing projects in 143 countries. We have developed tools and metrics that aim to do just this, increasing our impact. And these tools, that I'll introduce in a second, support agencies, countries, and council members by providing data on how the portfolio of GEF Finance project is doing. And let me stress, these tools are not accountability tools. They are, of course, right? But first and foremost, they are management tools. They aim to prompt actions to improve implementation. They also empower our partners in countries with the knowledge to accelerate implementation and allocate resources for maximum value for money. And this approach is grounded on key principles. For one, they adopt a focus on ensuring projects reach milestones with speed and with quality. But these tools also support the implementation of policy standards that aim at enhancing efficiency. And you'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow. Altogether, they contribute to enhancing the performance culture across the partnership with a collaboration that is driven by evidence and by data. But let me now turn to the next section of this presentation that precisely looks at how those tools help us track progress over time. And I'll do that with two important metrics here that I won't go in many details into them. Instead, I'll just stress that disbursement is a key area we are looking at. Because why? Because it's a useful proxy to assess the achievement of results. The more resources have been disbursed, likely the more progress you have done through a project. And here you can see on the left side of the screen that we've made significant progress in the last year. Another area we are paying much attention to is how quickly new projects start implementation. Because it matters for projects to stay on schedule and deliver the results countries expect on time. This point is also important in the current context as a project adapted implementation arrangements. And of course, I make a reference here to COVID-19 and the fact that it may have, in some cases, led to further delay to adapt to the situation. And those tools are about adapting to situations as well. But at this stage, you might wonder, speed and disbursement is one thing, but what about the overall health of our portfolio and the quality of it? Well, we have useful proxies to that. And what you see on the screen is that over 80% of our projects received satisfactory ratings for implementation progress and the likelihood to achieve project outcome. This highlights, a very healthy portfolio of projects. But it also shows that nearly 20% or 1 in every 5 projects is facing challenges. And that's why our attention needs to make sure that projects move from unsatisfactory ratings and eventually reach the project objective they are aiming for. And we are watching this area closely and share this information with agencies so they can take the right measure with countries to improve project implementation. And let me show you how it's taking place. What I showed up until now is only a couple of metrics, but in fact, we have developed a comprehensive framework that assesses project efficiency and effectiveness. They cover the speed of operations, project effectiveness, and whether co-financing materialized. And we also make a version of this dashboard that is catered to agency, disaggregated by agency. So it's very helpful for agencies directly to be able to see how they are doing, including in relation to the overall GEF partnership average. You can see here with the use of the traffic light system that the GEF is doing well in most areas. But let me highlight just one area where we need to do better. Here we see that projects are taking too much time to reach the midterm review stage. What we want to see actually is more projects reaching MTR, this important milestone, earlier, because we know that the chances are higher to put a project on the right trajectory of implementation if MTRs are undertaken early on. And let me stress that there
Cyril, just let me pause quickly. I see a couple of questions on the chat line about the interpretation and accessing the interpretation. Nicholas, I think some folks in the Secretariat are answering those. I hope it's working. I don't know if, Nicholas, are we okay to keep going with, and it's just a question of knowing how to, the interpretation button at the bottom, you can select the language. Or Ted, are you there?
If you want to listen in
Christina?
English,
Yeah.
yes, please. We're working on it. It's an IT issue. So if you want to listen in English, click on the interpretation button and just the off. That's the default. The French is French. It seems for some reason we're trying to figure out Spanish and English are switched around. So you can just click on the other button. I'm sorry about that. Okay, now I get a message that everything is back to normal. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Sorry for the interruption, Cyril. Thank you very much to the interpreters and to the IT folks who are helping us. In case of glitches, we have a team behind the scenes and we do see those technical questions on the chat button. So excellent. I am very glad. Muy bien. So Cyril, back to you. Oh, let me just say also for questions that will come in after Cyril and colleagues finish, don't forget to pass them directly by email to William. He will help us, given the large numbers, put together the questions and get them back to our presenters so we can have a good discussion. And the technical questions and all the greetings can stay on the chat line. So thanks, everyone. Cyril, please, back to you.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks to the interpreter for the wonderful job. I was just going to say that there are a couple publications where portfolio progress is highlighted, and the portfolio scorecard that I just presented in the previous slide is available in the monitoring report. I think it's on the webpage of this seminar, so just take a look. But we also, as I was saying earlier, we also work directly with countries. And the tool you see here, the country fact sheet, is providing focal points and their teams with the evidence necessary to manage a portfolio, to exercise their role of portfolio oversight. This means sharing data on the progress a country makes in programming new resources, as well as in terms of monitoring how well projects under implementation are doing. Both sides are very important. You want to program your new project, but you also want to make sure the projects under implementation are doing well. So that's why the job of the OFP doesn't stop at endorsement. The OFP and the team, the countries, has a duty and a responsibility to monitor progress and a right to access the data. And that's what we're making available here. Now an OFP can see if his or her country is on track to allocate new resources and the resources left to use, actually. And it also helps to see how well the projects under implementation are doing. We also want to know if a project is facing startup delays, because we can't really accept a project that has been CO endorsed, but has not really started to deliver progress on the ground. And we don't make this available for the sake of sharing data. And this has to be very clear. It's not, again, about accountability. We do this to empower countries. And our experience is that countries take advantage of this to engage with us in the Secretariat. But mainly, they engage with agencies, the agencies that are supervising those projects. And also with executing agencies, because we know that it's not the Ministry of Environment where the OFP most often sits that is responsible for executing those projects. So it's a tool to help engage with those agencies on proactively moving implementation forward. And let me stress in closing that the GEF portal provides a live interface on project progress, and that countries have an open and restricted access to project documents that relate to their countries. And this is a game changer in the GEF history. As soon as agencies update project data in the system, countries can see them. And I invite countries to take full advantage of it. And finally, as I close this presentation, let me stress that these tools allow the partnership to manage shared accountability. Shared accountability, why? Because we evolve in a partnership, and every one of us has a responsibility in making projects reach the outcomes they intend to achieve. But the tools also help to provide the means to achieve and nurture a culture of cooperation that is based on evidence to enhance the delivery of global environment benefits and outcomes. And I thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you so much, Cyril and colleagues. Henry, I see Henry on the screen there, and Jonathan, I'm sure you're somewhere in the system. They were also part of crafting these pieces and work on it very closely together with Cyril. Let us now go to the third part of this session, which is the using GEF resources strategically, the GEF resource allocation and utilization, the STAR system. And here we have Naying and Sanja, also colleagues in the GEF Secretariat. They have the lead roles on the STAR system, on utilization of resources, and on tracking resource utilization, which is many of the things that were just presented by Cyril. So Naying, Sanja, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Very good.
Thank you, Peter. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Naying Pan. I work together with my colleague, Dr. Sanja Tilak Singh in the STAR team. It's my pleasure to introduce you the GEF7 system of transparent allocation of resources. We call it STAR. So what is STAR? It is a model or mechanism by which GEF resources are pre-allocated to countries in 3 GEF focal areas: biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation. The other 2 GEF focal areas, chemicals and waste, and international waters, are not included. So this allocation system has been implemented and approved by the Council since GEF 4. It aims to maximize the impact on global environment, promote sound environmental policies and practices, meet convention requirements, and match country-driven priorities. It is important to know that It's important to know that not all GEF funds are allocated to countries through the STAR system. So in GEF 7, about 48% of the total programming envelope was allocated to countries and focal areas through the STAR. Next slide, please. So country allocations are decided through the STAR structure. The country score is based on 3 major indices. There are country benefit index, country performance index, and GDP index. Each major index has a set of sub-indicators. In this graph, we only show the top tiers of indicators, but the detailed methodology is captured in the STAR policy. So the first major index, the global benefit index, it aims to shift GEF resources to countries where GEF investment could deliver the most environmental benefit. It has 3 sets of sub-indicators for 3 STAR focal areas. And the second one, country performance index, evaluates countries to see if they have the capacity to deliver on those potential benefits. It has 2 sub-indicators, portfolio performance and institutional assessment. Then the last one, GDP index, is designed to shift resources to countries with a lower GDP per capita. Each of those major index and their sub-indicators are based on country-level data, which are updated and recalculated every 4 years for replenishment. After these indicators are updated, country scores is calculated by applying weights. The weight of major index and their sub-indicators are also determined by replenishment. Not all STAR calculations are captured by this graph. After we get the preliminary country allocations, we also apply floors and ceilings. Next one, please. So floors and ceilings are designed to make sure that no country gets either too many or too few resources. This graph tries to visualize this concept. So in this graph, each dot represents a country. The dashed line indicates the min and max of the preliminary allocations, and the solid lines are the ceilings and floors. As you can see here, the ceilings lower the maximum amount which a country can get, and the floors pull up many countries' allocations to make sure countries obtain the minimum allocation amount. The floors split up by least developed countries and non-least developed countries. For LDCs, the least developed countries, the minimum allocation floors are higher than non-LDCs. So after applying floors and ceilings, we get the final star allocation numbers for each country. But it's not the end of the star process. There is a very important string attached to the use of star, that is the flexibility rules. Next one, please. The flexibility allows for certain movements of funds cross focal area, while countries' total allocation stays the same. There are two kinds, full flexibility and marginal adjustment. Recipient countries with total country allocation less than $7 million have full flexibility to program their allocations across the focal areas. And recipient countries with more than $7 million are allowed marginal adjustment across focal areas. The allowed amount is either 2 million or 13% of their total country allocations, whichever is higher. Next one, please. So this is an example of the initial GEF7 star country allocation. You can find it in the GEF7 star documents, or if you are a portal user, you can also find similar tables in the portal star report. This table shows individual countries' focal area allocations and their total country allocation. Those are in the first red circle. And the next red circle shows the flexibility rules. The full flexible column indicates if a country is fully flexible or not. So as we just mentioned in the previous slide, if a country's total allocation is less than 7 million, it's fully flexible. If not, then the allowed flexible amount is showing in the last column called marginal adjustment. The amount is either 2 million or 13% of the total allocation. Next one, please. In each GEF circle, we closely monitor and track the star utilization and the use of flexibility for each country. You can always get the real-time data from the GEF portal, as Cyril just mentioned. And the GEFSEC also tracks and shares the data periodically, such as through the corporate scorecard and country fact sheets. Cyril also mentioned them in his presentation. So this is an example of the corporate scorecard. So GEF corporate scorecard has issued every 6 months during council meetings, and it dedicated 1 section to star. It monitors the star utilization by certain country groups, as you can see here, such as the geographic region, least developed countries, and small island developing states. It also tracks the use of flexibility by fully flexible countries and countries with marginal adjustment. Next one. And this is an example of the country fact sheet. It is another medium through which the GEFSEC communicates to countries where they stand. Star utilization is also captured here. We use Thailand's example here, but I know other examples have been shared with you on the introduction seminar webpage. Next one. So this is the star in a nutshell. For details, you can always go to the star documents list here. And of course, Sandra and I always welcome any question or comments. Thank you very much. I will give the floor back to Peter.
Thank you so much, Nayang. Really appreciate it. Thank you also, Sanja, for working on that presentation. I know a lot of behind the scenes work has gone into it. So we're diving now into the systems of how we work, results, top line indicators, the allocation of the funding. You saw the table there of what the GEF7 allocations were. So at this point, we're making good time. And so now we will open it up for questions and answers to the 3 different parts of the presentation. Francoise, of course, also at the top end of it. And I will ask William, if you are there, who perhaps has been seeing incoming questions by email, I hope, and maybe also some information on the chat line. William, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, I haven't received anything by email, so it would be nice if you use that if possible. I've also answered some of the ones that come on the chat, but there's one that our colleagues might wish to talk about, and that is that Abdeta from Ethiopia says, I just want to raise that most of the indicators cannot be realized in such a short time frame, as most of the projects from the star location are short-lived. And Guillermo added that it would be very useful to look at the outcomes of GEF projects well beyond their completion date. This is the true measure of their outcome. So that's one area that you might wish to refer to. And the other one I see in the chat that has not been answered, regarding the issue of ambitious goals, the performance could be unsatisfactory in many cases, considering that projects always face challenges in implementation. Also, implementation challenges are not the same for all countries. How is this reflected in the monitoring framework? So why don't we start with those two?
Thanks very much, William. So please, if the presenters would like to respond, I'll let you come in, one on STAR and one on the first question mentioned by William.
So hi,
Cyril
everyone.
or Sonja, please, yeah.
Cyril, do you want to go ahead?
No, please.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to, the first question mentioned by William, which was tangential to STAR, but it's actually a much bigger issue of the question of project outcomes being sustained well beyond the life of the project that is funded by STAR or otherwise. And this is a topic that the GEF Secretariat has been looking at in some detail, as well as the Evaluation Office. So I would say for the last 3 or 4 years in particular, the Evaluation Office has had an interest in looking at how sustainable GEF project outcomes are beyond the completion of the project itself. And so this is a sort of a separate analysis that has been undertaken and is currently being undertaken again by the Evaluation Office for OPS for their upcoming review of GEF business, which they do every cycle. And I suspect you might hear some more of that. I don't know if anyone from the Evaluation Office is here, but they have, you can find a lot of analyses on their websites and on our websites as well. So for whoever had that particular question, I'm happy to point you in the direction of some of those. It's an ongoing challenge, I would say, an ongoing objective where we want to ensure as much as possible that well beyond the life of a project, whatever gains or outcomes have been realized continue to be sustained. And there are many factors that impact that well beyond the funding of the project itself by the GEF. So it's I've answered and not answered at the same time because it's such a huge topic, but we're of course I'm very happy to have a separate dialogue and to point the asker of the question into the direction of some of those analyses. But a very good point, very well noted, and it is something that we are looking at together with our colleagues in the Evaluation Office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonja. And we had another question. I don't know if that one would be Naying. Cyril, the floor is open.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. No, it's a relevant question. Countries face different challenges, and some are in more challenging environment period. It can be they are facing domestic conflict. It can be the capacity to implement the project is not there yet. And that's precisely what we are trying to gauge here, trying to see those projects that are facing implementation challenges. And why it's important to track it and to report on it is because we don't want to be in a situation where a year after we have been informed that the project is not doing well and be in a situation where we have not done anything. And us within the GEF partnership have this responsibility to communicate about it and incentivize as much as possible to improve performance and take actions in this regard. You know, it can be many different types. It can be through enhanced engagement with the executing agencies and finding solution. It can be through project restructuring, etc. So that's the background here. But definitely a project that is rated unsatisfactory for multiple years in a row will have has a lot of problem, and that's not a situation we want to be in. And then I fully sympathize with you that the rating is different thing for different countries, different agencies, and there's this work of reconciliation that exists within agencies right now to sort of calibrate, but it doesn't exist within the partnership as a whole, because those ratings are specific to each agencies and adhere overall to shared requirements.
Very good. Thank you very much, Cyril. William, back to you for next questions.
Certainly. I think Francoise wants to come in.
Francoise, please.
You're muted, Francoise.
Sorry. If I may jump in and speak to the second question as well. I heard it differently also at the more strategic level, right? Which is the fact that maybe if we want to have greater results and if we want to have a greater impact on a global environment, including a transformative impact, one that can carry the potential to change systems, and we may need to be willing to take a higher level of risk with the projects that we propose and that we approve and that we try to implement, right? And that's a live debate within the GEF Secretariat and among donors, right? Because there is urgency, and because, as Carlos Manuel reminded us, there's a window of opportunity which is actually quite limited in time to affect the trend, right? So we have to be open-minded here to projects that would set to reach much higher level of ambition and therefore results, right? But might also carry a higher level of risk, right? And that's not unreasonable to attempt, because if you use the analogy of the house on fire, which is often used for climate change, if your house is on fire, you are likely going to be willing to take much more risk in trying to salvage it, right? Than if you were not facing an emergency. And the same applies to the GEF, right? So in facing to GEF 8, one discussion which is alive is, since we have the chance to work with grants and to operate at the frontier of innovation and to try things and to have a track record that shows that we have been at times very successful in fueling innovation. Think about the introduction of renewable energy and how they made it eventually to market in a fully sustained, cost-justified way, right? There is a case for greater risk-taking. And I think it's important all across the partnership that we don't equate maybe missing on results as necessarily bad management or a lack of diligence, right? It might be that we go for higher risk, higher return, and among these ventures, some of them will succeed impressively and some of them will be less successful. What matters, as I was saying earlier, is to give it our best effort in all cases and to be diligent in all cases and to manage problems towards resolution and so on as we implement. Thanks very much.
Very good, thanks. William, back to you. Let's take another round. Yeah.
Sure. Let me come up with the questions that have come in since then. So one, I think, is a follow-up from a previous one. Does the GEF measure outcomes of projects well beyond their completion? For example, 5 or 10 years later? Project managers often have difficulty in measuring outcomes within the 4-year project cycle. The GEF may be missing opportunities of showcasing some of its achievements in terms of global benefits over the long term. The other ones I'll translate from Spanish. I understood that the assignment of resources is on demand by country, according to the projects submitted. This means that countries that are prepared to present projects get more resources. This seems unequal, is that correct? Next one, the follow-up of projects is very important. And now that agencies design and execute projects, countries lose the possibility for developing their own capacities. Is this statement true? And finally, why is there no star allocation in international waters and chemicals? Let's start with those.
Very good. Okay, I think the first one about measuring outcomes after project completion is Cyril. Is that right? Yeah.
I'm happy to take it, but then our expert on the topic, Sandra, might want to add.
And Sandra, please, yeah.
But briefly, the GEF secretariat work stops at completion. That's where the project is expected to submit a terminal evaluation, and then it moves on to the independent evaluation office, which takes the responsibility to evaluate projects in a more thorough manner. And this can happen years after completion. There's parallel work that is taking place. And obviously the GEF, as I said, that can opt to conduct other types of reviews if it wanted to, but typically by policy, that's not what it's doing. The other piece of work that relates to that is about ensuring the durability of the results that are achieved, and working toward that during implementation and starting a design, ensuring that you have a sound theory of change, that you work with the right stakeholders to get there. So that's very important in this area. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think the second question, maybe, if I have it right, resource assignment, is it on demand? Do the first ones get more? I think that would be Sonja Nying, if I'm right.
If I can just add to Cyril's.
And also on the first one, yeah.
Yes. So on that topic, it was what I mentioned before, the sustainability or durability of GEF investments. And as Cyril very correctly identified, the ongoing attention that we've been paying to this topic in the last few years has led to the identification of a series of factors that we're increasingly trying to embed in project design and implementation. So even though the measurement of these outcomes are beyond project lifetime is the purview of the evaluation office, and they do these studies, those studies are helping us now to put into place at a stronger level these kinds of factors that Cyril mentioned, theories of change, engaging with a wide range of stakeholders throughout the project, at design and implementation, etc. And we're learning by doing. I mean, we're getting more experience as we go along, and through our own analyses and the analyses of the evaluation office, we're starting to, zero in on some of the enabling conditions that would allow sustainability beyond project outcomes in particular settings. So that was just my addition to Cyril's point. On the other point, there were two star questions. I think one was. So if it's okay, Peter, I'll just take both of them at the same time. One was on the—
Yes, please, thanks.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So if countries get more, so as Nine pointed out in the presentation, we have 5 focal areas in the GEF. 3 are under STAR and 2 are not. So in fact, the 2 questions can merge into one, because the other question is, why are those 2 focal areas not under STAR? So for the countries that are under STAR, each country gets a fixed allocation through the transparent mathematical system that Nang described at the top level. So that's biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation. International waters and chemicals and waste, they don't have STAR allocations. So within STAR, countries have a fixed pot. Now, how they use that pot, which projects they come forward with, at what point in the cycle they come forward, that's what we work through when we help countries program their resources, when we work with agencies as well. So once a country gets a STAR allocation, you can't actually get more than that STAR allocation in those focal areas. There are, of course, a lot of non-STAR resources within GEF programming that countries can access, including set-aside resources, including various packages for particular initiatives, and including the focal areas of chemicals and waste and international waters. Which leads to the next question, which is, why are these focal areas not under STAR? Well, international waters by definition doesn't fit into a STAR framework, because STAR is very much at the country level, and international waters operates more at a regional level because of the nature of the resources. But I think that we can also say that the answer to the chemicals and waste question also applies to international waters, which is the lack of as yet strong data sets on which we can base the allocation system. So, I mean, there are a lot of layers to STAR, and it all comes down to country level data that is cycled up through the system, through all of the parameters and weights and indices to arrive at final allocations. So no matter what theoretical framework we come up with, if we can't populate it with reliable data that is updated frequently enough for us to do those updates, then we won't be able to put it into the system. So on chemicals and waste in particular, that has been the challenge of the last little while. I mean, every cycle, every time we have replenishment, we do look to see what the latest data sets are, and if we can find a way to bring these that focal area in particular into the fold. But so far, the data is getting stronger, but we're not yet there to bring it into stock. So those are
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. And maybe for the last question, I wonder if I could turn to Francoise. I have the third question that I wrote was, given that agencies supervise and in some cases get involved in relating to project execution, I think William was translating this question, does that mean remove capacity building needs at the country level? It's sort of a question about sharing the responsibilities between implementation and execution. And maybe if you could take that, Francoise, and also wrap up this session because we're at the time to keep moving and go to our coffee break. And just to mention that the questions that were also asked, we will keep those. And when we move to breakout groups on day 3, we will have a chance to return to any questions we haven't been able to answer either over the system or in writing. So Francoise.
Sure, thanks very much, Peter. And let me reinforce, if you do have questions, write them in either in the chat or directly in email to William, because it's valuable to capture them, and there are other places where we will have a chance to answer them. And otherwise, we'll do our best to make sure you hear from us, right? That's important. So implementation versus execution, it's a good question, and it's sometimes a little hard to understand. So let me go back to the underlying logic and philosophy of how our policies are set up on this, right? As per our project and program cycle policy, there is separation of duty or segregation of duty between the function of implementation and the function of execution, right? And typically that means that the GEF agency, one of the 18, is doing the implementation, and a national agency selected by the country in interaction with the GEF agencies is responsible for execution. And the reason why this is in policy the set arrangement is because it is very important to avoid a conflict of interest between the two functions, the execution function and the implementation function, because the GEF agencies oversees the work of the executing agencies and has responsibility also over some of the accountabilities of the executing agency, and therefore needs to be arm's length from it, right? Now, we have space for a few exceptions to this, because there are situations in which it is either not possible or not practical for the designated or the best suited national agency to carry all the set of functions that are required to execute a project, right? It can be an issue of capacity, it can be an issue of country context, it can be linked to exceptional circumstances, natural catastrophe, or issues of political transitions, etc. And therefore, subject to authorization by the GEFSEC at the time of project approval, there can be some provisions to allow exception. But obviously, these can only happen if the operational focal point of the country is intending to have it this way, right? And if there is a contractual relationship set up in such a way that the services provided by the implementation agencies are recorded and the costs associated to that are recorded in the project documentation and in the budget, right? I'm getting to some details here because we do hear lots of questions, right? And I think it's important to the agency that hear us to know how that works, and to the country representatives that hear us to also know how that goes, right? So to summarize, I would say, it is highly desirable, of course, to have a national agency, and one that can absorb the growth in capacity that comes with implementing a GEF project, right? And not just over the technical issues that we work on. There's a lot of learning on substance, but there's a lot of learning on process as well. Not even just GEF processes and policies, but general valuable implementation skills, such as running transparent procurement. That's valuable for all projects, not just GEF projects, right? So it's highly desirable to have those skills practiced by the national agency and staying with the national agency, right? Everything else is an exception, and as an exception, it's not the rule. It means that it comes in a minority of cases, that it has to be justified and argued, and it has to be authorized by the GEF Secretariat. And there's really no exception to that exception. Namely, if you are in a situation that doesn't respect that basic rule, you should be discussing either with us or the agency if you're a country, or with the country if you're an agency, and make sure that this is fully transparent and fits the intention of how the GEF policies are set up. The idea here, and what has been approved by Council via our policies, is that it is a national agency which is implementing, right? Thanks. Now, to the point of closing this session, I saw from the intensity of questions that we're getting that there's quite a desire to go into a depth of details, right? Because we try to give you fairly detailed presentations already, and we are getting a lot of relevant questions, right? So, I mean, given the ground that we have to cover, that really includes many other points, we don't want to allocate more time to this, but we certainly want to take stock of all questions. And you will find our entry points. There are quite a bit of overlap at times between those topics, and you will find different instances. The working group, as Peter managed, or one of the closing session, which is ask everything you want from GEF management. Now, you may want there to have more strategic questions. So, we will find ways to engage your questions, right? So let me stop us here for that session, because we are so far so good on time. And we want to be able to carry on with what is a very rich agenda over 4 days, right? So Peter, thanks to all for participating. Thanks for the questions. And Peter, back to you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Françoise. Let us give a virtual applause to, if we can, if we were in the same room, to thank our presenters so far, beginning with the very beginning, William, Carlos Manuel, of course, and the presenters we've just had. Thank you so much, everyone. So now, before we keep moving, you probably saw in the updated agenda, and as promised, we'd like to take a virtual coffee break. So let us give it a try here, or let us do it. One purpose, we'll have 5 or 10 minutes now to allow everyone to, let's say, stretch out, have a sip of tea or coffee or a glass of water, whatever you have, depending on the time of day, I suppose. But we would also like to try one thing, which is we would like to see each other. As I mentioned. And so we haven't had everyone turn on the video pictures yet at one time, because we don't know if we'll survive the bandwidth. So what I'd like to try and do is ask you to open your video according to the groups that I will now mention. So let's go first. We have different participants here. So from the governments, the operational focal points, if I could have everyone from the Africa region. If you hear me, Africa, including North Africa, Middle East, please open your systems. Let's see if we can get you on screen. And while you're doing it, as we start to see you, if you'd like to say in the chat another hello to everyone, your colleagues, how the weather is wherever you are. I can tell you here in Washington, D.C., it's been freezing. We have a sheet of ice. We didn't get snow, we got ice 3 days ago. So we're trying to stay warm. Okay, so Africa region, if you have a chance, open up, and then let me go to Asia Pacific, the Pacific Island countries, all countries in Asia, different parts of Asia. If you can join us. Let's see. I hope you're out there. And if you'd like to say hello over the system, now you can do it. It could be slightly chaotic as well as on the chat line. We'd love to hear your voices. Are you out there? Is that Asia Pacific? Is that Africa?
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, you can tell us where you're calling in from.
Hi.
Hi, I'm
everyone.
from Indonesia.
Fantastic.
Hi, everyone.
Where are you from? Calling from?
I'm from Cote d'Ivoire.
Cote d'Ivoire?
Yes.
Indonesia.
Hello from Nigeria.
Wow. All right.
Hi.
Hello from Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. Wow.
Hello from Bangladesh.
From Vietnam.
Yeah.
Bonjour depuis le Mali.
Bonjour. Bonjour de Mali. Oui.
Hello. Hi. Hello from Bhutan.
Bhutan. You can speak any language here, of course. Yeah.
Mozambique.
Hello from Sudan.
Mozambique. Oh, okay. Wow. Hello.
Burkina Faso. Morning. Good evening.
Morning from Indonesia.
Good morning, good evening, maybe, right?
Good morning from Mauritania.
Hello, Kenya.
Hello,
Good
I'm
afternoon
Nepal.
from South Africa.
Nepal, South Africa. Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Again, good morning.
Hello, hello. Okay, let us keep going. I want to see if
Hi
we can...
from Burkina Faso.
Burkina
Frederick.
Faso. Hello.
Hello
I
from
hear some...
Sudan.
From Benin.
Benin.
I'm Mangan for Congo.
Mexico, my gosh, wow. All right. Let us keep
Okay,
going on the
hi.
regions. Now I want to get the other regions so we can have all the government regions. And I would like Europe and Central Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. If you haven't opened yet, please open and say hello to all of us and your colleagues.
Hello from
Anybody out
Costa
there?
Rica. From Costa Rica, hello.
Costa Rica, all right.
From Brazil.
Hola, buenos
Good
días
morning.
desde Colombia.
Hola, buenos días.
Buenos días, Colombia. Buenos
Hola a
días.
todos.
Hola a todos.
Buenos
Qué
días,
placer.
buenos días desde México.
Colombia.
Buenos
días,
Costa
Rica.
Costa
Desde
Rica,
Colombia.
bien. Excelente.
Panamá.
Panamá.
Brazil.
Lucia.
That's
Buenos
it.
días desde Venezuela.
Hola de Nicaragua.
Hola, Costa Rica.
Argentina, Costa Rica. My goodness. The systems are working. We have not yet crashed. From where was that?
Hello,
Bonjour.
hello. I'm Anahit Simoyan from Armenia.
Hi, Anahit from Armenia.
Buenos
Hello,
días, soy María Antonella Parodi de Argentina.
Hello.
from Turkmenistan.
From where?
Turkmenistan.
Ah, okay. Wow. My goodness.
Hello from Austria.
Hola, soy Gabriela Montes de Ecuador.
Ecuador, Austria. Wow. Now
Hola,
everybody knows
Argentina, ¿cómo están?
you can push the right-hand arrow and keep going to see how many we have. We're still missing some people on the system. So let me ask all members of civil society. You're so crucial to part of our family. So if we could have all members of civil society, if you have not joined, opened your videos, if you could do so and say hello.
Hello from Albania.
Hello. Wow. Hello. Hey.
Hello from
You
Albania.
can also wave. Yes,
Yes.
we see you. Hello. How are you? That's Zana.
Zana from Albania.
Yes, very good. Albania. Yes. Anyone else from civil society out there?
Yes, Guillermo
from Lesotho.
Lesotho, and who was that then? Burkina Faso?
I am from Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. Hello from Washington DC to Afghanistan.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Hello,
All
good
right.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Who is that?
Yeah, this is the Operation Focal Point Nigeria, Mr. Jordan Stanley.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining. Hello. Hello to Nigeria.
Yeah.
Hello,
everybody.
Hello. Where's that? Where are you from?
I'm Safiatou from Cote d'Ivoire.
From Cote d'Ivoire, Safiatou. Hello. Thank you for joining. Thank you for opening the video. Let me get to our last group now. We're going to take test the bandwidth. We have agencies. So if I could ask, we'll go back to William's quiz to see all the agencies accredited after 2011. There are 8 agencies that were accredited after 2011. I don't know if you know, I hope you know who you are. If you could sign in. Hello to those agencies, and then agencies from 1999 to 2006 who were accredited. Hi. Okay. Hello.
I am Octavio Casilla. I work in CAF, Latin American Development Bank.
Welcome, Octavio. Great to see you.
Hello.
Hi, it's Patricio from the IDB, Latin America.
Patricio. Yes, good to see you. Benson, good to see you.
Yes, from the African Development Bank.
Yes, excellent. Leticia, I see you. Gerardo, I see you. And then the last agencies are the original 3 from UNDP, UNEP, and the World Bank. The original. Yes, hello.
Hello, Abdul from UNIDO.
From UNIDO. Well, okay.
Hi,
UNIDO.
I'm from Conservation
UNIDO, yes.
International.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Prapti.
Hello, I am from
Unido, Madagascar.
I am
Hello,
from
Sini
UNIDO.
Kinesh. Hello again, UNIDO. Well, yes.
Second from
Hello,
UNEP.
Zmila.
Hello, Nairobi
Hello,
headquarters.
hello, Nairobi, UNEP.
Hello from
Hi from IUCN.
Hello, IUCN.
Hi from Rome, from IFAD.
Ciao, Roma.
Hola,
from UNIDO.
Mila from UNDP New York.
Hi, Nadia Mujica from FAO in Panama. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Laura Darby from UNEP.
Hello from Florence Baggy from Nairobi.
Hello, Nairobi.
Luzmila from New York, UNDP.
Hello, New York.
Good morning, this is FAO in Barbados.
Hello, good morning, FAO in Barbados. Very good, very good.
Hello, I'm Emma, working for UNEP in France.
Hello, UNEP.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I work with UNIDO in Ghana.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you. I think we have survived the bandwidth. It is really great just to see you even momentarily. You know, we have over 500 people and we're trying to, you know, innovate here a little bit to see how we can start to get to know each other and not just have a conversation from the screens to each of you, although that's, of course, a crucial part of this. So we greatly appreciate your saying hello, turning on the screens. We will do this again. We will have a coffee break each day and we'll have some breakout groups where we'll be in smaller sessions. Since the bandwidth has worked so far, and as we have questions and answers and discussions, or if you would just like to, don't hesitate to keep on your video screens. We'll let you know if the system starts to buckle. Hopefully not. We hear you, yeah. And so, but do watch the audio systems so we don't have too many conversations going on at the same time. All right, hello everybody. Thanks for being part of the virtual coffee break here at the GEF Introduction Seminar. So if I may now return us back to our regular session, let me go to the agenda. We're now in the section on GEF 7 programming. And this is another, of course, critical, crucial part of the GEF's work. And I would like to see if we have Claude in the system. Claude, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Peter. Thank you.
Fantastic. So let me turn it over to Claude to run this segment of the seminar and introduce the folks who will be speaking to us now. Claude, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. As Peter said, I'm Claude Gascon. I'm the manager of the programs unit at the GEF. It's my pleasure to participate in this introductory seminar about the Global Environment Facility. In this session, you're going to learn about the major features of the GEF 7 replenishment cycle in terms of the programming of resources, so the projects and programs that we have funded. I'll start by giving you a general overview of the programming to date, and if I can get the slides to post, that would be great. Thank you very much, Nico.
Sharing, yeah, let's see. I don't see it yet.
It's coming up. It's coming up right now. There we go. So as I said, I'll start by giving you a general overview of the programming to date. And my colleague, Mohammed Bakar, who we'll introduce a little later, will then provide you with an update on the impact programs, which are some of the largest and more complex programs ever undertaken by the GEF partnership. These were very important priorities in GEF 7, as you may know. I'll then come back and end the presentation with just a few slides on the vision for GEF 8, the GEF 8 replenishment cycle that we're initiating right now, as has been discussed already. Next slide, Nico, please. In terms of some of the high-level statistics of GEF 7 programming, we're happy to report that we have programmed over $2.8 billion of the GEF 7 funding envelope. And considering that we're just at the 63% timeline of the 4-year cycle, which means that we've had 5 out of 8 council meetings and work programs, This level of programming represents 73% of the total funding envelope. So we're well ahead of the timeline in terms of getting resources approved and out the door. Now, this is a result of a lot of hard work and proactive engagement of all of the GEF partners. We also have very positive results on the co-financing ratio for the entire GEF 7 portfolio, with a ratio of 1 to 7.8 to date. And this is well above the ambition for the GEF 7 cycle as a whole. While we still have 3 work programs in GEF 7, we have already been able to work with 16 of the 18 GEF agencies in advancing projects and programs with our eligible countries. And we do hope to engage with the 2 remaining agencies before the end of GEF 7. Programming across all focal areas has been more than equitable, with all focal areas being programmed at least 64%, meaning they're on target or ahead of their resources, and some focal areas with a much higher proportion of program resources. Now let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Here are the more detailed levels of programming for each focal area. As you can see, chemicals and waste and international waters are just about in accordance with the 63% timeline of the GEF 7 cycle. For the other focal areas, however, much higher proportion of resources have been programmed, with close to 80% of the land degradation focal area having been programmed. The other 2 dedicated pots of money in GEF 7, the non-grants instrument and the small grants program, have also been programmed much faster than the cycle timeline, with 80% of NGI resources out the door or approved by Council, and a full 100% of the SGP allocation having been approved by Council. Next slide. We've presented 5 work programs to our Council in GEF 7 to date. Included in these 5 work programs were a total of 220 projects and 19 programs or addenda to programs. As mentioned before, the co-financing ratio is close to 8 to 1, but more importantly, the portion of co-financing that is composed of investment mobilized represents over 75% of the co-financing, with a ratio of almost 6 to 1. This is a very important result, as during the replenishment negotiation, GEF donors really wanted to understand more fully the composition of the co-financing of projects and wanted to pay specific attention to this particular slice of the co-financing. Again, both figures exceed the overall co-financing aspiration for the GEF 7 cycle. Next slide, please. In GEF 7, Council has approved projects and programs with 16 of the 18 GEF agencies. As I said, we still have 3 work programs and hope to engage with FECO and FUNBIO, which are the 2 agencies, WAD and FUNBIO, which are the 2 agencies which have yet to program resources in GEF 7. You can also note that close to 80% of the GEF 7 resources are programmed with 4 agencies: FAO, UNEP, the World Bank, and UNDP. And while UNDP has over 30% of all resources, this is much less than in GEF 7 and previous cycles, where their share of resources was always above 40%. So we are trying to spread the resources a little more equitably across these big agencies. Next slide, please. I mentioned that our Council has approved 220 projects and 12.5 programs. Now, I obviously don't have time to list all of these, but I did want to mention and give you an idea of some of the most important programs that have been developed in this funding cycle. My colleague Mohammed will give you a deeper dive on the impact program, so I won't say anything more about them here. In terms of other important priorities for GEF 7, these include a global wildlife program that deals with illegal wildlife trade in Africa. We have several programs in the climate change focal area, including one on e-mobility and one on establishing mini-grids in Africa. We also have 2 major programs in the chemicals and waste focal area, one focusing on reforming the artisanal gold mining industry and removing mercury from that mining practice. Another chemicals and waste program is focusing specifically in SIDS countries to clean up many harmful chemicals. And finally, Council approved the first major project to provide Indigenous peoples groups with resources directly to ensure that the adequate stewardship of their lands and the conservation of globally important biodiversity is contained therein. Next slide, please. Cyril has given a great presentation on the results framework for GEF and specifically for GEF 7. This is the sum of all of the results across the core indicators. And the portfolio has had a very impactful set of results across all indicators, as you can see. As mentioned by Cyril as well, we've already surpassed the GEF 7 targets in many cases, specifically for marine protected areas created, for land restoration, and for the reduction of POP emissions. While core indicators, other core indicators are lagging a little bit as compared to the GEF 7 targets, we are confident that we will be able to deliver close to the 100% mark for all indicators with the remaining 3 work programs. Next slide, please. As you've just seen, we're well advanced in the implementation of the GEF 7 cycle with just a little over 25% of resources that remain to be programmed. So we do still have a few remaining priorities to complete the cycle. First and foremost, we're working hard to ensure that all countries are able to program their remaining STAR resources. We have 3 more work programs in GEF 7 and are confident that all countries will have the opportunity to present their priority projects to Council for approval. In terms of programs, we're still working on a fairly sizable international waters program called Island to Island in the SIDS countries. We're hoping to get this into the next work program at the June Council meeting. And lastly, there are 2 programs in the chemicals and waste focal area that are in the works. One focusing on reducing the use of agri-chemicals and one on the elimination of POPs and mercury in Africa. With these last few priorities, we will have fulfilled all that we had presented to our donors and Council as part of the GEF 7 programming strategy. Next slide, please. As is all too familiar to all of us, the past year has been very challenging to say the least. The pandemic that has hit the world is demonstrating that restoring a healthy and functioning natural world is key to ensuring human well-being. This means that the work of the GEF is more important now than ever before. We know that several actions that are funded by GEF projects and programs, from promoting nature-based solutions to supporting local communities with alternate revenue streams, all the way to incorporating green recovery principles in projects, these actions will not only help in avoiding future pandemics, but also bring some relief to important local stakeholders in these difficult times. We have worked in concert with GEF agencies to make sure that all GEF projects going forward are designed with COVID-19 impacts and opportunities in mind. And now I'll invite my colleague, Mohammed Bakar, to walk you through the impact programs. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claude. Most of what I'm going to highlight touches on some of the issues that you heard this morning from the CEO. So by introduction, my name is Mohammed Bakar. I'm the lead environment specialist in charge of major programs in the GEF Secretariat. Next slide, please, Nico. So if you recall, our CEO this morning highlighted some of the challenges that we face in the GEF in terms of dealing with the increasing global complexity of challenges around the world in keeping the planet healthy. And in GEF 6, we started piloting some programs to really help position us institutionally as a financial mechanism in confronting these major challenges by advancing what we then call the integrated approach programming. These programs were designed to mainly address drivers of degradation, but also try to build on our experience already in advancing cross-focal area programming at multiple scales, engaging stakeholders both within and across sectors at multiple scales, and then also trying to enhance our financial leverage, something that we already do through our co-financing, but taking it to a higher level. And then increasingly aligning with country development priorities, because as you heard from the CEO this morning, the countries in general are looking at development agendas around agriculture, cities, urban transformation, energy development. And so positioning our framing programming to ensure that we can address these alignments in a more holistic manner. And also then looking at bringing in a little bit of synergy beyond what we already do through multifocal area projects across the conventions. Next slide, please. So in GEF 6, we had 3 integrated approach pilot programs. You probably are familiar with the acronym IAPs. It's pretty popular these days across the GEF family. One was in looking at commodity-driven deforestation, specifically those driven by beef, oil palm, and soybean around the world. The second one was on food security in sub-Saharan Africa, focusing primarily in the drylands, where the challenge of environmental degradation is exacerbated by climate change and other anthropogenic factors. And then sustainable cities, also looking at opportunities to engage in helping countries deal with the growing problem of urban challenge and urban sprawl in particular, and looking at a holistic approach. So the focus of these programs was not just tackling the drivers, but also looking at ways to integrate multiple dimensions. Next slide. So I won't go into the details of these programs in the interest of time, but just wanted to highlight some of the lessons that we gained from that experience in GEF 6. Obviously, as you probably can already tell, the shifting paradigm from the focal area by focal area approach that we already have done and we have very good experience on, and looking more into advancing an approach that allows us to think holistically and embracing all the multiple dimensions that, that these challenges present for countries as well as for the global environment. It also gave us a chance to advance theories of change about how the GEF investment can really make a difference in these challenges. And we also start thinking about systems, because of course, every project that we invest in has to generate global environment benefit. But in addition, now we can think about how does that also influence the overall transformation of that system. And we also started engaging in multidimensional programming as well, linking local, national, and global, as well as regional, and also bringing in opportunities to harness synergies across the different sectors that were associated with those systems, and of course then connecting the stakeholders that are engaged in that process. On the innovation side, obviously, I already mentioned the synergies across conventions, but also helping countries to advance a more programmatic way of engaging with the GEF at national level. Next slide. So we took those experiences we took them into the GEF 7 planning process, and that helped us to include in the replenishment discussions for GEF 7 3 additional programs, this time thinking more about systems transformation. So in addition to the integration that we piloted, we're thinking more strategically about how can we really use that experience to start thinking about transforming systems. So we have 3 programs that were proposed for GEF 7. Food systems, land use and restoration. This is basically building on our experience with both the commodities program and the food security program in Africa to bring together 3 very critical aspects of the agriculture and food systems space, which is the land use, the supply chain, as well as the restoration agenda, focusing not just on the commodities that account for the greater proportion of degradation, but also the supply chain aspects related to some of our more important food staples like rice and maize. And then we have sustainable cities, again, expanding what we started in GEF 6, this time thinking about how we can really transform urban systems, both in a forward-looking manner, but also in an ambitious framework that delivers across multiple convention agendas in addition to what we did in GEF 6 on focusing mainly on climate change mitigation. And the third program area was on major forest biomes, looking primarily at the large forest blocks around the world that have a critical role to play in sustainability of the global environment. Next slide. So as you've already seen the breakdown of resources from the summary that Claude presented, but just to reinforce the point that we actually had funding windows linked to each of these programs to allow us to work with countries in a very constructive manner so that we can have a greater amount of resources directed towards them. And so the total envelope that we projected was 846 million, which would be a combination of STAR resources as well as matching incentives.
Mohammed, sorry, let me mute because there's some background noise, okay? And you need to unmute yourself, and interpreters, you too. Go ahead, Mohammed, unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Everything clear now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Next slide. So just quickly to run through these programs, the food systems land use restoration, as I mentioned, really tries to bring in three main dimensions of the global challenges we face with food systems, which is basically tackling the negative externalities in the value and supply chains, promoting deforestation-free production of some of the major commodities that are responsible for deforestation, and also looking at large-scale restoration of landscapes where we can shift some of those production practices. So comprehensive land use planning was at the core of the approach that we promoted. Next slide, please. The second one on sustainable cities, again, mainly on sustainable urban planning, building on the momentum that already was being created by local governments, municipalities, and cities around the world to really work in driving some of the transformational change that was being pushed through the conventions as well as other global fora. Next slide. And then finally, the sustainable forest management. So we have three major emphases on that: the Amazon, the Congo Basin in Africa, as well as dryland forest ecosystems around the world that tend to fall through the cracks, but also have a major role to play in terms of their importance both for the global environment as well as for livelihoods. Next slide. So just quickly how we rolled out these programs, because it's important for hopefully for everyone experiencing with the GEF for the first time to understand this process, and hopefully we can gain from that collectively. Next slide. So the process was obviously part of an experience that we have to develop, because these are programs that are not yet part of the formal project cycle process that we're all familiar with. So we had to have a process that was quite open and transparent and allowed communication across the entire GEF family. So once the replenishment phase started, we informed countries and agencies about the process. We issued a guidance note so everyone understood what was expected based on the replenishment documents. And we convened meetings with the agencies. We had country level consultations. This was all an opportunity to be able to build a common understanding about what is required for each of these programs. And then we issued a call for expression of interest. As you saw from the financial table that I presented, there was STAR allocation, which countries have control over, but we also had incentive mechanisms which allowed countries to increase the envelope of their STAR allocation by participating in these programs. And of course, those resources are very limited. So we had to ensure that we had a competitive process to select the countries that will benefit and greatly from participation, but also have the greatest returns, so the global environment benefits that the programs were targeting. So the countries will express their interest, and then together with agencies, we will select the countries that meet the criteria, and then the agencies will then take the process forward in preparing the programs for council approval. Each of the programs were led by a lead agency, and that lead agency selection process was also done collectively with the lead agencies to ensure that everybody was following the process consistently. Next slide. So how did we use the funding? So this slide here just illustrates the process we use. So for every program, countries that were selected will have star allocations in 3 focal areas. So an example here is one country that has 4 million, and the other one has 8 million. And then the formula we used was 2 to 1. So if you put 4 million, you get 2 million as from the incentive for that program. If you put 8 million, you get 4 million. So together you get 6 million for a 4 million country, or 12 million for an 8 million country. And that made you join the program. And that program then will have an umbrella project, or what we call a global support and coordination project, that also then provided the support and coordination required to ensure that the program is bigger than the sum of the project. So there was benefits from being part of the program that is gained from that program child project, as well as the program child project facilitating coordination between countries and among countries that are participating in the program. Next slide. So based on that formula, we were able to program pretty much 100% of all of the resources. We're still at just a little over 80% for the food systems program. And as you can see from the map shown here, we have representation from all regions, that all eligible regions across the continent, across the world. And the different codings there show the number of countries that are participating in each program. And so as you can see, we have fairly good representation, and in accordance to the expectations that we had put in place, and have maximized the use of the resources that were set aside. Unfortunately, the demand always is going to be greater for these programs than the funds available, but the intent is always to increase our experience and our learning process, because at the end of the day, the basic principles that are inherent in these programs should be relevant to all countries, and we hope that this is something we can take forward in GEF 8. So Claude, with that, I'll hand back to you to talk about GEF 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Sure we'll have a lot of questions on the impact programs during the session. As all of you know, the GEF cycles, the funding cycles, are negotiated on a 4-year basis, which means that about halfway into one cycle, we already have to start thinking of the next cycle and initiate the replenishment negotiations that last for about 18 months. And that's where we are right now, starting to think of GEF 8, although we're talking about GEF 7 right now. But I just wanted to show you a couple of slides that will give you a little bit of the flavor of our thinking as this process is happening in real time. We have a schedule of meetings, with the first one in late April, and we are preparing our documentation for that. We're currently using this vision to guide the development of the GEF 8 strategy, drawing on the evolution through the last 2 or 3 cycles of GEF funding that includes a growing emphasis on tackling the drivers of environmental degradation and help promote transformative change in key economic systems with a strong footprint on nature and climate. The ultimate goal is to achieve a sustainable, resilient, and healthy planet. Next slide, please. We also have developed several guiding principles or directions that will help frame the GEF 8 strategy, and they're listed here. It starts by the protection of the world. It starts.
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry, can you mute yourself, please?
Thank you. 120.
Yeah, someone out there needs to put the, maybe, I don't know who, on mute.
Have more than one dog.
Christina, can you mute everybody and I'll unmute myself?
Let's do that. We'll do a general.
When I give it to.
Thank you.
Okay, Claude.
As I said, it starts by the protection of the world's major environmental assets, which is exactly the mandate of the GEF. We will do this by promoting the transformation of key economic systems, which today are responsible for much of the environmental degradation that we see. The GEF needs to continue to be a trailblazer of innovation and open new solutions for environmental health that others can then come and bring to scale. And finally, we need to support countries in their efforts to enhance their national policies, eliminating disincentives for nature conservation and climate change, a topic that our CEO very eloquently discussed in his opening remarks. By doing all of this, we will also be promoting a vibrant green and blue recovery to the pandemic. Next slide, please. In terms of how we get there, we intend to continue to move towards better integration of actions so that we can deliver multiple global environmental benefits. We need to be focused and selective to make sure that all resources are well used and not fragmented. And through the mobilization of a diverse coalition of actors and bringing in the private sector, we can ensure that we are influencing systems change, as Mohammed pointed out, and not just fixing environmental problems that will be recurrent. And finally, we will continue to respond and support country priorities that form the basis of their commitments to the multilateral environmental agreements or the conventions. Next slide, please. As we move to develop our GEF8 strategy and present it to donors in the first meeting in April of this year, we held the first event as part of this process, the Technical Advisory Group meeting just 2 weeks ago. The TAG meeting, as they're called, is where we bring in science and technical experts from around the world to discuss and debate the most important environmental issues of the day. This allows for the free flowing of ideas that can and do influence both the framing of the GEF8 strategy, as well as point to some of the most promising ways of achieving our vision as presented earlier. We're in the process of absorbing all of the rich material that was produced, and believe me, there was a huge volume of results and thinking that came out of the 4-day meeting, and translating much of this into an ambitious, impactful, and convincing case for our donors. You'll be able to see the result of all of this process in early April once we post the first draft of the GEF8 strategy. Next slide. And with this, I thank you again for the opportunity to participate and for your attention, and we'll be happy to try and answer any questions. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Claude and Mohammed. Really appreciated. We're now diving into the GEF programming side, what we're doing in GEF 7, what we're thinking about in GEF 8, the process for the replenishment. So let me turn to William, who will has been looking through questions that have come in to him or on the chat line. We can go beyond, we started some minutes late with the virtual coffee, so we can go beyond the 10:30 time to allow us to have a full range of questions and discussion. William, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. So let me read the first 2 questions. One says, related to the impact program to protect the Amazon biome, I wonder if GEF plays a direct role in situations of forest destruction, such what we have been seeing happening in Brazil in the past months. The other one is from Mohammed. The links between the Sustainable Cities Impact Program and addressing climate change is very clear, however, not so clear regarding global biodiversity. Could you expand on this a little, please? Let's start with those.
All right, so let me just address the first one. Of course, the impact program on Amazonian sustainable landscapes, the purpose obviously is to ensure that a sustainable pathway to the conservation and sustainable use of resources in the Amazon is established. And that, of course, requires the project to engage with all of the governments. In fact, the steering committee is composed of government representatives of each of the 7 countries involved in the program. And so not only in Brazil, but we do, or the project does engage, and in fact, the actions across borders and within the national jurisdictions are decided on by this steering committee. And so, yes, we do engage with the Brazilian national government in that respect. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you, Claude. Yeah, so indeed in GEF 6, when we piloted the IAT the IP programs, the intent for cities at that time was from targeting climate change mitigation benefits, looking at all the different sectors in the urban space, energy, transport, as well as other externalities associated with buildings and the urban infrastructure. But we did have one country, the city of Asuncion, in Paraguay, the city of Asuncion, that actually tried to bring in a little bit of biodiversity agenda, focusing on their wetlands that are apparently very critical for bird conservation in the country. But that was just an exception. But in GEF 7, one of the things that we've tried to do is open space for cities that are really keen to bring in the biodiversity agenda to also do so if that intent is part of the overall transformation agenda. But the cities program is not intended to tackle threats to global biodiversity because it's not the place to do that. But certainly it is opening opportunities for us to better integrate the biodiversity agenda in urban space. And some of the options that we're exploring, including nature-based infrastructure, for example, for managing flooding and issues related to green space, as well as habitat conservation in the urban space. So there are efforts to be able to help countries accommodate that as best as possible where it will add value to the biodiversity conservation agenda. So I'll stop there.
Let me mute again before we go on. Just a second, please. And please, Claude, unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. So there's one question in the chat to Claude that says one of the requirements for GEF 8 is to enhance government's contribution. I would like to know if finance allocated for one country by one of the GEF agencies, such as UNEP, UNDP, IFAD, etc., can be considered as government contributions so that GEF 8 resources will be used as co-finance. And let me translate an earlier one that says, I understand the GEF programs are vitally important. Nevertheless, I'd like to know why we don't have a program on environmentally organizing the territory. Most of the countries in Latin America and Caribbean are trying to do that. Could this be a program in the future? Let's go with those two.
Okay, the first question, I'm not sure I quite understand it, but let me just say that the co-financing contributions to GEF projects are fairly detailed in the type of co-financing. And so if agencies are providing in-kind or other types of resources financial to the project, that is categorized as co-financing coming from agencies. If governments are applying some of their national budgets to advance project actions, those are considered obviously government, and then there's private sector and other types of co-financing. So I think if it is from GEF agencies, it's characterized as such and not as coming from the government. On the second question, Mohammed, I'm sure has something to say about this, but the land use planning aspect is a very important one in the recent cycles, GEF 6 and GEF 7, specifically with respect to the integrated approach pilots and the impact programs. If we think of the full or the food land use and restoration impact program, what we are trying to do obviously is to remove deforestation from the supply chain of a lot of the commodities. And so if we work in one area and are successful in removing deforestation from that area, one possible repercussion is that deforestation occurs and is moved to another place. And so we incorporated not necessarily a hard requirement, but a desire to see land use planning as part of the underlying set of elements that would be part of the country programs, part of the food and land use restoration, specifically to try and avoid a lot of what is called leakage of deforestation from one area to another. But Mohammed, maybe you want to elaborate on that point as well.
Yeah, I think you played it out pretty well, and actually that's even within the same country, that's very likely to happen. But we expanded it globally by targeting all of the geographies where these various commodities are likely to be produced, so that we can engage the countries in those discussions and therefore ensure that the standards are embraced across the board for every commodity that we are targeting. And I think that is really helping to make a difference, because the global platform that we have now created allows these dialogues and interactions to happen on a more systematic basis. And as a result, we can influence the overall supply chain going forward.
Claude, this is Carlos Manuel. Can you allow me to jump
Absolutely, Carlos. Yes.
Well, thank you, Claude and Mohammed. And I just want to contribute a little bit more with what you're saying in terms of land use planning. First, we do a lot of land use planning within the Sustainable Cities program, where the spatial planning is key in terms of what we do with cities. And we also see a high potential to engage with planning with regards to the ocean, as we look forward in GEF 8, the need for the spatial marine planning and ocean governance are two issues that came very, very strong during the TAG meetings. And even though we've been there, I tend to believe that GEF 8 can be the moment to upscale that component, particularly on marine spatial planning, because that's a basic element. And my final comment is on the need to really understand that in many ways, the confrontation, let's put it, the confrontation for land uses within food systems and conservation initiatives are due to the fact that there is not enough data available for good land use planning. In most of the countries that we work, we don't have those maps associated to land use capacity, where we can understand which are the top agricultural soils and which are the marginal soils, because it doesn't make any sense to us, even from the food security side, if we keep on promoting deforestation in areas that are not suitable for food production. As a matter of fact, I was reading the other day that 30% of the land that was cleared out of forests to produce food are not providing food security at the country level. So that is an issue. If we can put more data, particularly on land use capacity, we can generate consensus on how to use the landscape with the Ministry of Agriculture, which is traditional, the main force through their policies for land use change. Thank you, Claude.
Thanks, Carlos.
Very good. William, shall we, do you have, I think
We
let's
have
have
a couple,
another round.
We can do a couple more, yes. So how is GEF planning to promote private sector investments in natural resource management? Is one of them. And the other one is transformational systemic change requires systemic governance arrangements across sectors at national, subnational level, meaning acting beyond environmental sectors only. How does the GEF envision strengthening systemic governance systems that include cross-sectoral collaboration? Thank you.
Thanks. And almost just on cue, as the private sector question was appearing, I saw Matthew Reddy's face appear. And there will be a session tomorrow, I believe, on private sector and blended finance. But since Matthew is here, do you want to just give a 30-second answer to that question?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for the question today. Great to hear this engagement. From the private sector perspective, the GEF has an engagement strategy. And I think what you'll see tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern time, is that the strategy incorporates a value chain approach. So our way of working through to landscape management includes all of those actors that have an impact on the landscape through value chains. And these are identified through the child projects, through the global projects themselves, especially as it pertains to, say, the impact programs such as the FOLUR impact program and the Drylands impact program. So we take a value chain approach and we include all actors within the private sector. So that includes those that are driving demand for sustainably produced commodities and trying to place emphasis on supporting those kinds of supply chains, measures, standards, and protocols that can address those issues. I think that's all I can say at this point, but I look forward to discussing further tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. On the other question, I'm sure our CEO will have a lot to say. He already did this morning about cross-sectoral collaboration in governments. But this is an area where there has been a tremendous change in the GEF over the past 10 years, I would say, in terms of the dialogue from the Secretariat and from the agencies to not solely be Christina, do you want to?
Yes, hold on a second. Hold on a second,
Okay.
Claude, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, interpreters are muted, so please unmute yourself.
Thank you. In terms of the dialogue from the GEF Secretariat and to a certain degree from the agencies, not being solely directed at environment ministries only. And this has become extremely important, as you probably understood from an impact and an integration point of view for the impact programs, where success is dependent on cross-sectoral participation of different government agencies when they are not located in the same ministry. So we have to have, as Carlos Manuel said this morning, a Ministry of Agriculture working with a Ministry of Environment if we are to have a successful food land use program in a particular country. And so the dialogue from the CEO to the engagement that we have with governments has taken that different more comprehensive scope. We have also worked very closely with agencies in the actual development and design of these projects and programs, so that at the national level, again, the proper and correct suite of government agencies are brought in to execute different pieces of the projects, again, so that it's not just an environment ministry project alone, because that in many cases would not get us to where we need to get. And so while there are no formal mechanisms or policy that force this cross-sectoral engagement from national governments, there is certainly a lot of movement in the engagement that we have had, and I'm sure that many agencies have had, because of the necessity to be comprehensive, to be engaging with these different sectors for the success of a lot of our investments.
Claude, just to add to that, definitely for the impact programs and for the IAPs, one of the requirements for participating countries in the programs was indeed to create space at national level for such cross-sectoral engagement to start influencing how decisions and choices are made at the national level that will impact on the overall intent of these programs, which is to advance integration as well as systems transformation. And so it is a tough area, because we know traditionally government institutions, as the CEO said, don't necessarily want to work together. Everybody wants to maintain their own sectoral space, but I think it's something that we have to keep on, and we have to be very persistent on, and hopefully eventually it will become part of the normal way of operating at national level. So lots to go on.
Thanks very much, Claude, Mohammed, on that. Carlos Manuel, you're most welcome at any time if you'd like to come in to follow up. This is about the sectoral, breaking down the sectoralization and the working together in the governments. William, let us try one more. If there's one last set of questions, we're getting near the moment of the closing down on the first day. William, anything more?
I don't think we have any more for the time being. Thank you.
All right. Well, if that's not the case, let me go back to Claude. Mohammed, if you'd like to say maybe a few closing thoughts, if you'd like to, reflecting on this discussion and We've walked through the, an overview of GEF 7 programming, what we've done to date, highlights of the impact programs, the pandemic challenge. That was Claude's first piece. Mohammed took us through the integrated approach that we built in GEF 6 to the impact programs, reflecting many of the key points highlighted by our CEO, integrated approach programming, some emerging lessons. We're really shifting paradigms here, multidimensional approaches and innovations. The impact programs are part of an evolution in the GEF approach to programming, from building on integration, maybe in the GEF 6 timeframe, to thinking about transforming systems. I think that was a point highlighted by Mohammed as well, and that is reflected in the different impact programs that we have. And we saw some images of the progress and implementation, and then Claude took us through the vision for GEF 8, tackling drivers, transformative change in key systems. A sustainable and healthy planet is where we're trying to go. And then a very up-to-date, let's say, latest picture of programming directions. We just had the TAG meetings, which were wonderful gatherings of the scientists a few weeks ago. And we're looking at some key features: protecting major assets, addressing drivers, transforming key systems, institutional level reform, and at the national level. And then talking about how to get there. Again, key elements of integration, being focused and selective, working with coalitions, responding to emerging priorities at the country level, which are linked to and reflected in the conventions to which they report, in which the GEF serves as a financial mechanism. A little bit about GEF 8 process going forward. And thanks everyone for the questions and answers. I don't know, Claude, any remarks to help us close on this part of the session today?
Just to say a big thank you to the more than 400 participants that are still online. Huge interest and some very good questions. We'll be happy to answer any other questions that may come in over the next several days. There are a couple of other sessions, as I mentioned, from the programs team, and we'll be present throughout the next 4 days. So thanks again.
Very good. So why doesn't everybody, as we close, and now we're about to, please turn on your video cameras again. We'll have a chance to see each other. This is going to be a rehearsal also, because maybe tomorrow at the end of the session, we will see if we can get a group photo so we can have this for the record books, all 467 of us. Please turn on the video, say hello. Carlos Manuel, I don't know if you want to say hello or goodbye. Also, it was really great having you. Thank you so much.
Sí, muchas gracias,
Hello.
Peter.
Thank
Muchas
you.
gracias. Saludos a todos. Nos vemos mañana.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, mañana
Thank
muy
you.
temprano.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye everybody. Don't forget, tomorrow morning at the same time, same channel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See you tomorrow.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you, Peter, and all. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Yeah, and to the invisible team behind the scenes.
Bye
Thank you very
bye.
much.
Bye.
Gracias.
Thanks, everybody.
Nos
Yeah,
vemos
bye.
mañana.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.